Blue Nation, little town of Westcliffe, county of Custer, great state of Colorado, the greatest nation in the whole galaxy, the United States of America. Stephen Rorick, Jim McMahon. We have our astounding guest tonight, Dave Schneider from Round Mountain. Dave, how are you this evening?
I am doing well. Thanks for the opportunity.
Fantastic.
Yep, David, thank you for being here. Appreciate you.
Really appreciate you coming on this evening. So if you could, Dave, could you just tell us a little bit about how you kind of got in the position with Round Mountain? And
Yeah, it's kind of unique. So I moved into the valley in 2008 to be a manager up at Sky Ranch Horn Creek at that time. They needed a maintenance manager. So I was 22 years in Montana, actually in the music industry of all weird
oh, really?
things. Had a music store and repaired musical instruments. Came out here, wanted to do something outside and physical before I got too old to do it. So I worked up there 5 years. My second year there, the guy that was doing the water operator was an older gentleman. He wanted to retire. So I hired a gentleman from Michigan to come and be the water operator. He had to be trained. So I knew I was in trouble when I gave him the big, thick training book, and his eyes glazed over because he's very tactile, but not a book guy. So I made the mistake of saying, hey, I'll study with you, just on the intent to get him certified. So we studied for 6 months. There was 3 of us that took the certification test, and I was the only one that passed. So I became the water operator.
And so that was through the state then?
That was through the state, yeah.
Gotcha.
So there's all different classifications of certification. So I became both certified in small water systems and small wastewater system. Because Sky Ranch is rather large. They have 5 separate water systems and 3 commercial wastewater systems. And then an augmentation plan to help run. So I cut my teeth on that. And in 2012, we moved down here off the hill. And I wanted to get involved in the community, because that's one of the problems living up on the hill. You're stuck there. And I was reading the paper one day, and lo and behold, Round Mountain had a board position opening. I thought, well, shoot, I know more than your average Joe about water. So I went in and asked for an application. And then they found I was certified and got real excited and said, hey, our operator has recently left and we're taking applications. And I said, well, I just run this little podunk thing up here. This was big at the time,
Right.
to me. But after a couple of weeks, she wouldn't let me leave without an application. So after a couple of weeks, I decided, well, heck,
Give it a whirl.
give it a whirl, because camp, the finances up there were getting really tight. So I brought my application in and asked how many applicants there were, and there were like 40. I thought, well, there is no way. There's no way. There's many more people with much more experience. So I did it anyway, and I made the first interview, and I thought that was going to be it, and then got called back for a second interview. But I had a bucket list flying fishing trip to Ontario. So I said, sorry guys, I'm going to go fishing to Ontario. If you don't want to wait, it's fine. Hire somebody else, but I'll be definitely willing to talk to you once I come back. So I had best fishing trip of my whole life.
It's a good thing you went then, huh?
Yep. So I came back, we did a second interview, and they told me after that interview, it's like, we're going to take a couple weeks to figure it out and we'll let you know. And I thought, well, that's really good, because in 2 weeks I'll know if Horn Creek will continue to work or if it's time to make a change. Well, next day at 11:30 in the morning, hey, we want you to work for Horn Creek, or for Round Mountain. So that was in June of 2013. So I was hired as their operator. I was their operator until 2018, and then was promoted to field operations manager. And then just last year I was promoted to general manager.
Can you explain a little bit, Dave, what would be the difference there? So when you were in 2013 or whatever, did they have a general manager and all of that stuff?
They had a district manager.
For Round Mountain?
For Round Mountain, yep. So, and I was the operator in responsible charge. So basically, if something very stinky hit a very circular device, I was the one that got called. So, and enjoyed that. Of course, was completely ignorant that I kind of came in at a time where the infrastructure can had been kicked down the road
Right.
for decades and decades.
You're right.
And it seemed like everything was, ancient meters that weren't accurate. My second year here, the wastewater system blows out in the infiltrator fields, and now I've got a compliance order with the state to put in a new wastewater treatment. I got a well that's dying, and
Well, yeah, there's and that was something that I think that a lot of people don't understand the scope of what, it's a lot more here that's going on than just the sludge, right?
oh yeah,
Yeah,
I wish it was just the sludge.
Right. So can you go into little details though? So how many gallons, Dave? Or so the infiltrators, can you explain to me on the infiltrators, like how do they, I think most people, when they think about an infiltrator, they just think of their own system. How does that thing plug up? Does it plug up with sludge, or does it fill up with dirt, or what happens? What would cause the infiltrators to plug?
There was always a bit of a mystery that they always seem to have 8 to 10 years of lifespan. So yes, some of it, as more people came in and they didn't expand that treatment system, that there were some solids that were getting up into there, and that's what we thought was the problem. Until later when we were looking for a solution, and the state forced us to do deep soil core sampling in that area, and we found out that there was a mixture of an old ancient clay. It's actually old volcanic ash that's broken down over time. It's clay, and then what's called dispersive soil. It's that old ash that gets super fine, and if you do a traditional perk test, like the first time you do it, it looks like it perks great. But if you go the next day at that same spot, you'll have standing water because those dispersive soils have actually settled down. And once it gets to a point, it seals like you just put a tarp on it. And that's what was problem with all these infiltrator systems that we were putting in. So,
Very interesting. So it looked like you had a good perk, but it really, there's a clay layer
it
down
was
there
a
that.
fake perk.
Interesting. So that whole area in that 40 acres, then that kind of perks the same?
It is the same. We actually frantically tried to find, this all ties into, the solution that we were trying to find for the wastewater treatment system. We went 2 miles both ways on this. We had to stay on this side. It is all the exact same soils. It's all that volcanic stuff that came from those, from the east side here. So we're screwed. CDPH we're not going to let you discharge into those. You got to find another place to discharge. Well, all we got is Grape Creek, and now it's just been listed as impaired, and it's screwed us out of the first time. So we looked at evaporative ponds, but it's too cold up here for too long.
Right.
We looked at wetlands. We looked at all these different types of solutions, and they just wouldn't work up here. So we were stuck having to discharge into Grape Creek. That was our only solution. And that, in 2015, we were under compliance order. We did, like the good boys do, got a large engineering firm to help us out. So when you put in a new plant, you go to the state and say, hey, I need you to tell me what my new effluent limits are going to be. So we did a request for stream discharge and groundwater discharge. And this was before Grape Creek was listed as impaired. And when they came back, it made so much more sense to go to the stream. They were really easy. Our engineers said, hey, we can put in kind of 2 little mechanical package plants, and bang, you're going to be going.
So is that the new proposed system that you've had a hard time getting the state to give you the go-ahead?
No,
Is that?
No, that was our first flop. So, and it's heartbreaking because it was going so well. It was going to be a $6 million solution. That was a bit like, where are we going to get $6 million?
Right.
Our median household income here is like less than 40,000. That's not a big grape to squeeze.
Right.
So kudos to our general manager at that time. He got $1 million grant from Department of Local Affairs. He got over a $2 million grant with USDA, and then the rest of it in a low interest loan. You couldn't have gotten better. We were really excited. We finished up the engineering plans literally the day we sent those plans in for approval to CDPHE. CDPHE called us and said, don't send us the plans. EPA's just listed Grape Creek as impaired.
And expound, Dave, on what does that mean? The
So-
Grape Creek's impaired.
So there's different qualities of streams, and they'd been watching Grape Creek for several years, and now what's happened is the nutrient loading that is coming down Grape Creek is getting stuck in Deweese. And decades before, it wasn't enough that essentially Deweese is just a large treatment pond like we have. It does the same exact thing. But now the nutrient loading from, and you can have
Whatever
a
it is.
week-long, month-long argument of who and where, but the reality is there is nutrient pollution coming down and lodging there, and then causing eutrophication, which basically means there's enough green living plants, algae, cyanobacteria, all that nasty stuff, that it sucks the oxygen out of the lake, and it's really hard on the fish. So it got to a point, and it was just, the timing couldn't have been worse, because they kicked back our design. We then discussed with the state for 6 months, saying, hey, we are a disadvantaged community, we're small, we have all these exceptions that we want to use. And the EPA feds just came down on us and said, when the EPA lists it, all those exceptions go away. So they kicked us off and said, hey, you need to go back to groundwater discharge. So we started all over again, and a little over a year later, our second design came up for review, and in that review, that's when the state said, hey, we have concerns about that area that you're discharging. And then, like I said, we did the soil core sampling. Crap, they're true, it's right. We have significant issues. This is not good soil to do this in. So now what do we do? And like I said, we checked all these different other avenues, and none of them would work out. So we were stuck with having to go back to stream water discharge. So we then had to apply to the state and say, okay, gulp, what are the new discharge limits for an impaired stream? And they were super tight. They are super tight.
And so let's dig into that a little bit, Dave. So that would be like the discharge limit. So when you're talking about that, are you talking about actually? I'm just trying to get a grasp of like what the old technology was versus the new. So when you're talking about discharging into the stream, is that just the leach water itself? So you would treat the leach water and you'd save the solids till.
So the challenge of discharging into the stream, you have to have complete treatment at what's called end of the pipe. You don't have ground to be your final filter.
Right.
So that's the nice thing about doing groundwater, is they assume that that's going to do some filtration, and they have several sampling monitoring wells to see, if indeed that's doing that. So, which are a pain in the butt, because it's thousands of dollars every year to do all the monitoring of that. So the stream discharge is simpler, because and you can prove at the end of pipe that
What
your
it is.
system. But since you don't have that buffer of dirt, now you've got to make sure that new treatment system meets those standards. And we have literally some of the most strict standards, not only in Colorado, but in the United States.
And so that end of the pipe, there would be there would be no nitrogen, no phosphates, all of that stuff are very small concentrations.
Correct. So there's a list of
all of the stuff.
all these things. They just beat us to death on the nutrients, your nitrogen pollutants, your
Right.
phosphorus, and then arsenic is something they're freaked out about too. So just to let you know, on nitrogens, it's tight, but it's doable with current technology. Our phosphorus limit, usually a really tight phosphorus limit is 1 milligram per liter, or maybe a 0.5 milligrams per liter is considered a real tight limit. They want us to get to a 0.025 milligrams per liter in phosphorus. That is really, really tight and really difficult to get consistently.
So that older technology,
It was never designed to remove nutrients.
and the second step one, where before they created that, would that kind of do it then, or not?
The
No.
first design, nutrients weren't part of the whole system. Basically, BOD, which is essentially a measurement of the amount of bug food that's coming in. And they measure the amount of oxygen demand it takes for those bugs to eat a certain amount of food in a certain amount of days.
Understood.
So I just saw it's the bug food
Yep.
measurement, total suspended solids, how much is still floating around in there. Those have been part of the limits for forever. They had some nitrogen and they had some ammonia. That was pretty much what we had to meet. And those limits were very reasonable. A small little sequence batch reactor plant would have done just fine. But now with these limits, there's no way. We have to go super high tech to get there. And now the problem is that those grants and loans, they age out. They have a certain lifespan. So we're begging and pleading,
Try to get-
can we extend these? We need. So then they started system number 3.
And that's the electrochemical system? No.
That was the that was the big titanium 3-story tall plant. And I should have kept up. I just assumed that we're still in the kind of the $6 million phase, because our engineers never really told us, hey, be prepared, there's going to be something coming up as far as the expense on this. They didn't tell us until they actually got approval from the state. And then they said, oh, by the way, this is going to cost around $14 million now. Well,
Jeez.
Wasn't
beam
much.
me up to Mars and put it. It just simply was economic and feasible. And the design of the plant had changed so much that we lost all those grants and funding. So here we are, 5 years later. We have a plant design that we can neither afford to build or we can afford to operate. So it's not a solution. And discussion after discussion with the state saying, guys, this isn't a solution. We'll bankrupt the town. We need to find something effective, affordable, and sustainable. And this is not it. So we spent almost $700,000 on engineering for 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, we were back at square one.
Well, that's a lot of money
For us, yeah.
for spinning your wheels, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Kind of got the shit end of the stick.
yeah. And then, of course, we have significant water problems. We have a well that needs to get fixed. I just blew all the money that we had on this wastewater plant debacle. We've got meters that, some of them, when we checked them, are over 1 million gallons off. So it's like, we've got to change these meters out. How do you...
Is that where the smart meters kind of come
Right.
in?
So if you're going to upgrade, you may as well do it well.
You might as well. And
Well,
we-
yeah, because, if you're charging the public or whatever, you'd like to know where your gallons are.
Right, and
Is
we
that
have-
individual meters, or is that like the main meter off the well that was 1 million gallons off?
No, it was the individual meters.
Gotcha.
So there was a lot of free water throughout the district. And so we knew we had to do something, but how, we don't have jack money, how do you do this? Because even when you apply for grants, they always require you to have matching funds.
Right.
Well, which half of nothing do you want?
I know that
Which
well.
happened? Nothing do you want?
So,
So that-
fortunately, I grew up on a poor dairy farm my folks owned a grocery store to keep food on the table, and us kids ran the farm. And we learned to make solutions because there wasn't anybody else to do it. So
Right.
I'm used to that. So always been willing to look outside of the box for solutions. Stumbled onto a new program from the state energy office of all places that they were offering for the first time a incentive program. It's been forever for replacing light bulbs and that, but they put water meters on it. And I stumbled onto at a convention, an engineering firm that worked with the state and did that. So we started talking, and it's like, is there any way that we can do this without any money? Because that was our reality. And he says, well, I think there is a way to get matching money so that we can start pursuing grants for DOLA. So they come in, the state puts the onus on the engineering company saying, you have to go and tell us how much money capture the district's going to get from putting in new meters. Well, I knew I needed a well too, so I was able to negotiate with both the state and the engineering firm saying, hey, can we put this on this energy performance contract kind of mentality? And fortunately they said yes. So we'll put in super efficient motors. We're going to put in a 50 kilowatt solar array that will run the well 90% of the time. And so we got that. And so what they did is they did a 20-year projection of the money that we could capture, the additional revenue from the savings of energy and from the actual metering of water. And that came up to a certain amount of money in 20 years. So I took this little piece of paper with this number, went to DOLA and said, hey, will you take this as matching funds? And kudos to them, they did.
Awesome, Dave. Good job. Yeah.
So then we were able to get $850,000. It was a $2 million project. We were able to get $850,000 grant with them. And then we used that grant as matching money for the low interest state revolving loan fund. And they gave us two grants. They gave us an engineering cost grant and then a pre-engineering grant. So we got about $1 million in grants and then $1 million in loan. And the exciting thing on that project that's all completed now is we're easily, the revenue that we capture from the meters and the amazing amount, it used to cost us $2,000 to $2,500 a month to run one of the municipal wells.
Wow.
Our bills now are about $100 just from using the solar. Because one thing we have out here is a lot of sun.
Yep,
That's
no doubt
amazing.
about it.
That is
So
absolutely.
it actually is paying for itself. We didn't have to raise rates to pay for that system. I wish I could do that on all these projects, but
Well, and not to kind of get off track there, but let's cut in there real quick. So before we go on to the final solution of the fourth treatment, so what was wrong, or what had happened to the well? What was
it
wrong
was
there?
it was
Was it
drilled in
caved-
1975,
Old and caved in, or
and it was run hard and put away wet. They put too big of pumps in it, and always constantly ran it dry. And of course, if you know that, it constantly packs that stuff up. And then they had insult to injury. The way they mixed chlorine gas was that they would they stuck the hose down to the bottom of the well from the gas thing, and it mixed down there. Well, that ate up that whole steel casing, so
I
that
see.
just crumbled
You got a
in.
chemical reaction going on there.
Yeah, it's just
so
it's
did you
it's an oxidant, so it just
Absolutely.
did you drill a new well
We
then?
did drill a new well, and we have our most senior water rights are with that, what we call the Smith well over in Drew's place. But we've never been able to take full advantage of those senior water rights. So we can pump 270 gallons a minute almost all year out of that well and almost always be in priority. So why not take advantage of that? So this well that we do, it pumps out right about 275 gallons a minute. And we've over doubled the production capability for the town.
How deep is it?
It's not very deep because that's kind of a unique.
Like 100 or?
Yeah, we're at 110 feet.
And so, I mean, there's a lot of, I know this is going to be a very interesting and super in-depth conversation. So when you're talking about 250 240 or 270 gallons per minute?
Correct.
And then, so how much og plan do you, if you could pump your entire og plan, how many gallons would that be?
We could safely pump.
I've heard that maybe it's about 1.5 feet and then up to 2 feet.
Oh, more than that.
With your
to
junior
use
right?
Our full rights, if with full use of our augmentation, we could pump close to 1,500 gallons a minute.
What's your consumption?
We pump about 250,000 gallons a day. In the summer, it goes up to about 300. But that's about what we do.
And then, so how much of that do you get back at the waste plant?
We get, with our discharge now, we get about 40% return credit on that. So if we go to stream discharge, that goes up to like 80%, which
There's a lot of that's just going for
it's
evaporation.
just going and then return to the stream rather than evaporative loss, and
Right.
transit loss, and here a loss, there a loss.
Yep.
If you know,
I know.
water decrees.
I know quite a bit about water. I've lived here my whole life. I know substantial amount about all that stuff. So, okay, let's get back to the part 4 then of
Get off that rabbit trail. But just know that we really look, well, I am not proud at all. I will look under any rock and stump to try to find a solution.
You've had quite the challenges handed to you.
It's been
Yeah,
been really interesting.
We give you some. It's amazing. I know I came up here and I was building houses in like 2000, 2005, and we went to the meetings at the 2 towns, and they said, yeah, we definitely got a problem. And we decided, we're not going to invest here at all. And we just said,
Well, you know, when
until that thing gets fixed, it's kind of iffy. So it's been going on for a while.
it has been going on for a while, and it was kind of ignored until Colorado lost the lawsuit with Kansas
Oh,
over in
exactly.
Arkansas.
Right.
And all of a sudden we went out of compliance right away, and the state was forced to find water to send over to Kansas. So they were going up, and they came up to Great Creek drainage, and they came up to Round Mountains like, you're illegally, you're pumping out of wells with junior, and you don't have any og plan. So you either need to find water or reduce your pumping.
So when was the Johnson Ranch bought, and then were you involved in all that?
That was before my time.
That was before your
so
time.
that was purchased, right, I think in 2000, just for the water. It was a classic buy and dry. We needed those water rights. There was 4 different water rights on there, and they were pretty senior. So it took 20 years for us to actually separate those water rights from that land. So I was in the finishing process of finalizing that final decree and the final og plan. So, and then fortunately, right at that time, the housing market was booming. So I told the boards, like, let's sell this right now. I mean, people are going out and buying anything just 'cause. So we were able to sell that dry 320 acre ranch for $1.5 million, which is huge for us because we needed money for a well or a reservoir that the State Division of Water Resources is compelling us to put in. So that's a $3.5 to $4 million project. Where are you going to get the money for that? And when you got to do the waste,
And that hasn't been done either, right?
Yeah, we're in the process. It's actually, that design is in for approval.
Okay. So the complexity of this is absolutely, yeah. Just so folks understand that you're faced with some challenges that.
Well, and so let's talk about something, Dave, that I know hardly anybody knows about, and that's why would you need an augmentation reservoir? I mean, I have a pretty good take on it, but if you can, a lot of people just, they're wondering
Right,
why
yeah.
we would need that.
Yeah, the all augmentation plan here in Colorado is really complicated.
Very.
But essentially, to put it down is, the state will allow you to pump out of priority because, you know, our commercial wells have a water right just like any other rancher in the valley. And we are subject to, it's basically the oldest right gets the first amount of water, and then it's just the food chain down, and it all depends how much water. So of course,
And here again, it's first in time,
yes,
First
not
in time,
in line.
first in
Exactly.
time, first in right.
exactly.
Yeah, and Colorado is one of the few places in the whole United States. A lot of people are like, "What do you mean you got water rights? We just go out here and drill a well or do whatever." Colorado, of course, is
Right. Well, that's the biggest problem with the Colorado River is we have that law of appropriations here in Colorado, but the lower states don't. So we're kind of like playing two different games on the same stream.
And one other thing people need to recognize too, the United States was developed from east to west. That's why Kansas has stronger water rights than we did, because they were first in time.
Well, actually,
Or something of that nature.
what happened was there was the original compact was in, I think, the teens. Well, nobody lived here in Colorado.
There you go.
So they're like, oh, sure, we can send this water over to you. I mean, there's no demand. And of course, at the same time, all this is over appropriated.
Well,
the
and
state
that-
gave too many people too much permission.
that was the thing too that I see firsthand, right? I mean, so from my experience, a lot of these, when you're talking about appropriations, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, these mountains generated a lot more water than they do now. A lot of this stuff, these streams that we deal with, I mean, 35% is all they'll run. And the junior rights, I mean, there's no water for them.
Yeah, you
They
go
just
up
don't-
some of these tributaries and see where headgates are. And it's like, there's trees they haven't been used for 50, 60
Yeah.
years. It's like, wow. And it was a wet cycle. If you historically look at that, there was a wet 50 years there. Unfortunately, it was during that time, and that's why they call it the Wet Valley. This is the Garden of Eden. Anybody can get water rights. And now especially on the Arkansas, we are so tight because it's so over appropriated. And
that does have to do with climate change to a point, correct?
right. Well, it's interesting.
So it's like the grand minimum solar, you can get into all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. There's all kinds of arguments. I did remember we had a big windstorm, I think, in November of 2011. I think it was November or December. We had that huge windstorm.
Right.
Knocked on all the telephone poles.
Yeah, wiped them out. Took the barn off of.
I was up at Horn Creek, and we had some of those giant old ponderosas broke down, and we did some that were almost 400 years old. And it was interesting as I saw them was up, start checking the rings and just see what were the fat years. And really, it's an interesting that there's like this 50 to 70 year cycle of fat to dry to fat to dry. And
You can't really deny that. That's a
It's-
pretty good
it's
test.
there.
Yeah, and so I mean, when you try to say about climate change, the climate's going to change whether we're here or not.
Absolutely.
And you have to be, whether it's Fat City or not, you got to be good stewards of the water that you have. So when we got that ranch, we did a water decree, changed it from agricultural use to municipal use, and in that decree they allowed us a conditional storage rate of 150 acre feet, and to actually be part of that management. They also allowed us to manage our water rights and augmentation plan through DeWeese. And since Round Mountain didn't have any money, they went the DeWeese thing for almost 20 years. And then some of the ranchers in the valley objected to or opened our decree up and said, hey, you need to build that reservoir in order to manage that water upstream.
Yeah,
just on
the depletion of where the well is actually the cone of the
Right.
depletion. You need to put that water back in
So
that.
they wanted that. We argued that we can book up water, basically pay the water that we have stored to the people that store water, because Dewey's Die Ditch is the most senior water right, and that's what we've always been doing. But they did have a point that on the very rare case, if a part of Grape Creek dried up, we couldn't technically book water up to address any depletions. It just, the timing again was terrible because we're in trying to fix this and now they're like, well, you're just gonna have to put it in. So we've teamed up with Upper Ark. They're paying for a third of the cost for a third of the storage in there. And then we got a $500,000 loan from Colorado Water Conservation Board, and I'm pursuing another grant for that. But we're 75% funded, but we're still $1 million short, which is a little bit of heartburn.
Yeah.
Especially when we've got this over here. So it's always a dance, and I'm always looking for outside revenue streams because I know I can only charge so much here. The people just simply can't. They can't pay you. So you can't. I can pretend all I want, but now that we've rabbit holed forever on that. We're back to the wastewater. So here I am, 5 years in, $70,000 poor, and what do we do now? So I literally got on Google and said, alternative wastewater treatment systems. And a whole bunch of stuff came up. And I actually saw electrocoagulation as one of them, but my initial thought is like, skeptical. It sounds like something sold on late night TV with a set of steak knives.
Right.
And then, what was her name? Yarrow Spitzwagen? She worked at...
Spitzwagen.
Yeah, she worked up at Red Rocks Community College for several years. And she calls me out of the blue and said, hey, I think you need to look at this system. It's called electrocoagulation. And I worked with these guys. We did a pilot study at Red Rocks Community College. And, the amount of treatment that they can get is amazing. You need to check it out. And I thought, well, okay, this is just too coincidental. So I called the makers of the electrocoagulation unit up and said, hey, I'll tell you right up front, I am super skeptical about this, but I want to bring up 10 gallons of my poo water and we're going to run it through your little wazoo system and see what it does.
And you're going to drink it.
Well, he actually does. So the maker did. We actually did a pilot for, we did a demonstration for a gal that is with public broadcasting out of Colorado Springs. And when we got done running it through and through the clarifier, old Scott just went, So I did. I went up there and met them, and I got blown out of them. I could not believe the amount, 1 and 2 minute cycle through this thing.
How much will it get in a minute?
It'll get like 98%.
And how many gallons?
This was a little bench top. It was a 1 liter a minute, but they can go up. So
you can get everything you need.
Oh yeah, easily with a 90. We're thinking 290 gallon a minute EC units.
So
to what was that now?
290 gallon a minute EC units.
So
290 gallon a minute.
It's 180 gallon a minute.
Yeah, we're not close to that. So.
But there's a huge question there, Dave. When you say you're going to treat it, okay, so explain of what we're talking about treating, right? So, are we talking about treating the water itself that would be going into the leach field or the stream, or are we talking about treating the solid waste, or all the above, or how?
All the above. So, in let's say the traditional waste lagoon system that we have, that was super popular in the 60s and 70s. And really bang for the buck, they do a pretty good job if you keep the sludge from piling up. Because if it gets too high, then they short circuit, and that's exactly what the problem was. And it should have been, sludged 30 some odd years ago.
So what actually happens when you're talking about treating the ponds? What process is that?
There's two. So the main thing, your main goal is to recover the water from your waste stream. That is the main goal, to get that to a certain quality that you can either discharge back into the ground or discharge into the stream. That is the primary goal. The secondary goal is treating the sludge or whatever came down here. What do you do with this stuff? So in our classic lagoon system, I would respectfully disagree with Mr. Hedberg. It is not raw sewage, because raw sewage has a tremendous amount of nitrogen, tremendous amount of phosphorus, tremendous amount of volatile fatty acids, a tremendous amount of ammonia. And if we look on this is the report of the application, and we check all those basically things. Those numbers are really low for those, which means that the organic material that was in there has been eaten.
And so back to the actual treatment, so we're putting bacteria, or we're putting something in there that consumes the waste? Is that what's going on there?
Right, so naturally, there's bacteria that comes. So the lagoons are called, our design is called facultative lagoons. So it has 3 layers if it's healthy. So the bottom layer is kind of like your septic tank. Anoxic, no oxygen down there, and those are the heavy hitters. They eat because they actually steal the oxygen molecules off the food, off those carbons and off that organic matter. But they pass bad gas. So that's where you get that hydrogen sulfide.
I'm the same way.
I wasn't going to say anything. So the cool thing is, as those hydrogen sulfide bubble comes up into that middle, what's called the facultative, which has both anoxic and oxic bugs, they actually pull the oxygen molecule off of those little bubbles to survive, and then that actually goes up as hydrogen gas, odorless. So when it's healthy, it actually does a pretty darn good job. But the problem is the sludge. The solids aren't suspended through the system because it was just designed, that was part of the treatment. But it is being treated, so the electrocoagulation would be a secondary treatment process.
I see. So it's not a complete whole different thing. It would be
what's called a tertiary or secondary treatment, because it does really good on everything except for nutrients. Your nitrogens, actually does really good on phosphorus. Nitrogen, it struggles to remove ammonia, nitrate, nitrites. So we realized that we needed to have treatment on the front end. We can use the traditional lagoon system, but we can upgrade it. There's some really simple and inexpensive ways to take care of some of the inherent problems. If you go out to our system, some brilliant man who made lots of money said, hey, let's put a floating aerator on top and try to force air down into water,
sure,
which it naturally wants to come up. So instead of that, because it only affects like the first 3 feet. Well, we really need more than that. So why not put your fine bubble diffusers on the bottom and just let it slowly come up through like it naturally wants to?
So is that basically creating a stirring effect?
It's 2. It's creating dissolved oxygen, and then it's keeping those solids suspended so that they won't settle on the bottom, and those solids are suspended through, and then the electrocoagulation unit takes those out. So
they basically would work at the same time in the same lagoon.
Yep. So there is a prototype that's been running for 13 years in a little town called Hyder, Oklahoma, of what we want to put in here. They did a sludge test. It's supposed to be every 10 years you're supposed to do desludge. They did a sludge judge test in year 10, and they couldn't find any because it had just been
ate it up.
Yep. So it maximizes the amount of contact that the bugs have to eat it. That's what you want. And then that becomes lighter and lighter and stays, and then it's captured and zapped through the electrocoagulation unit, which is amazing. The new freak out pollutants, the forever chemicals. This is one of 2 known technologies right now in the world that actually has the ability to destroy that long chain carbon molecule. All the other treatment techniques is simply capturing it, but not destroying it. So you're not you're not addressing the problem. You're just giving it to some other place.
Well, yeah, and I mean, there's
to
a
get rid of.
yeah, there's a reason why that when they developed the PFAS or whatever, them fluorocarbon molecules. I mean, that's why they work so well. Is that's a strong bond. I mean,
Yeah, it's unusually strong. Usually, the longer the carbon chain, the weaker it is. But this one is unusual that sucker bonds together, and there's no cracks anywhere, and that's why they use it. Nothing sticks to it.
yeah, yeah. It's
And that's why it's so good, but it's kind of why it's so bad. So EPA has caught wind of Powell Waters, and they're excited. They're actually funding a water study using EC to take care of PFOA and PFOS on a small town just south of Pueblo. They're actually funding that, and then we're teaming up with Powell Water, and we're actually proving that we can remove those chemicals. We can destroy those chemicals and those long chain carbons, because what it does is it breaks it down into the basic elements, and them at themselves, it's inert.
yeah,
It's
it's carbon and fluoride.
It's just-
or fluorine. Yep. So
so we're excited to get this going. The problem is, and so one of the things another respectfully agree with Jordan Hedberg is that, you know, these applications for land app is just a, you know, rubber stamp with CDPHE. Well, that is laughable. CDPHE's DNA is CYA, or nicely said, cover your rear end, because what they don't want is to agree to something or give somebody permission to do something, and entities or other people will come back and say, you should have never done that. So they purposely create hoop after hoop after hoop, just so they are sure as they can be, that nobody's going to come back and beat them up for doing whatever. So for this fourth system, I have been working 4 years to get permission from the state engineer, the health engineer office, to actually just do the study, the pilot study. 4 years it took. And our land app that we're in right now, it's in for approval. I hope it gets approved, but that is not a guarantee. It's already been pushed back twice. So the first time they said, hey, you can't allow anybody else but up or Round Mountain to use that. You can't bring anybody else's poo in here. So they agreed to that, and then it just came back, and they said, hey, if it's a live stream and you're going to spray instead of, till it in, we're going to require 200 feet from a live stream rather than the standard 50 feet. So know that is not just oh, heck yeah, well, it's going to be,
You got some hurdles to get over.
definitely got some major hurdles to get over.
how much, David? How much do you need to get rid of to get the lagoons empty?
So this isn't ideal. So if you've ever driven by where the lagoons are, you'll see that there are 3 holes that have been dug for a second cell. That was done in the early 2000s, but they were never used. So I had the great idea. It's like, why don't we use these as the pilot study?
For the new electrical.
For the new, yeah.
Oh,
It'd
yeah,
be
for your
perfect. We could
startovers.
just perfectly put everything in the way we want it, and then we'll put a smaller EC in on a side stream, and then we can basically move everything over to that, and then we can slowly dewater this, actually run some of this through the plant because we can, but CDPHE scuttled that. It's like, why?
Well,
Why
yeah,
won't you let us do this?
Well, so what kind of objection did they have, or what kind of
It was-
objection did they give you?
So 2 things. The amount of infrastructure that we were putting in temporarily was too much. It wasn't approved by the state as a system yet, because it hasn't been approved by the state as a system. So it said, we're not going to let you do that size of treatment. And I said, well, the only way we can we can accurately do the pilot study with our existing lagoon is it's got to be pretty much the full size. So we can't do little side, it just, the amount of, you need time, you need bugs and all this, and there's no way we could shrink that. So then I said, and then the second thing was, it doesn't have a discharge permit for that new part of the system. So he says, you need to find an existing system that either has a discharge permit or you're gonna have to go through the permitting process, and that's automatic 2 years. It's like, well, dude, we've got to find a solution. We're on to year 10 now. So then I proposed, hey, is there any way that we can take our existing system and improve it and run the EC off that and actually run that as our plant? And they said, yes. Well, great. But I need to get their close as possible to the original capacity, design capacity that was there, so that we can actually do an accurate measurement of what we're doing. Some cool things. We're gonna serpentine the water. We're gonna simply put in skirting, so instead of the water going straight through, it needs to go through here. So it slows down the process, but also actually adds treatment capacity, because you've made it bigger just from it using the whole thing.
And that would be preliminary to the lagoon, or that's in the lagoon?
That would be
itself?
in the first 2 cells of the lagoon.
Gotcha.
So that just slows it down, makes it much more efficient. Fine bubble diffusers, we now have oxygen coming up. That keeps everything suspended as it slows through. And then oxygen, getting oxygen in the water is the most expensive part of that. And they usually use big mechanical blowers to push that in. The problem is oxygen's what, only 8-9% of actually what we breathe. So it's really inefficient. So they've created actually a microalgae to put in the ponds to actually create oxygen. So we're actually going to do that as part of our study, is how effective would this actually be? And then to help us, we've actually created a microbiological soup, you could say, to help us. We reversed engineered, because you can go out and get bugs in a jug anywhere. People sell them all. But we've had so much trouble trying to get some that play in the sandbox with our existing bugs.
I see.
So usually what happens, they all fight and die. So we found a company that was down in Texas that was willing to take our water again. I sent a 5-gallon bucket of our water and said, here's what I want. Find out what bugs I have. These are our limits that we need to get. Is there any way that you can create a basically microbugs solution to help us get to that point? And it took about 2 years, but we've dialed it in. And we've already, I would say it's called biological desludging. We put those bugs in now for the last 3 years. And we've taken about 24 inches of the sludge blanket down.
Wow. Amazing.
So, but this last year, what we found is we only got 4 to 5 inches. So what that's telling us is we've eaten the organic stuff off. And basically what is left is largely inorganic, just the hulls. It's kind of soil is basically what's left. And that's what we're going to be taking out. Now, does it have trace elements? Yes, it does. But nothing that is...
So what do a lot of these other small towns do, Dave? I mean, are they kind of in the same position?
There are so many. We never wanted to, but we've become the poster child of the rural system. I know of at least a dozen systems about our size that are actually putting with CDPHE off and saying, hey, can we wait and see if this pilot study works at Round Mountain? And
so if that works, then you'll be looking to dump to Grape Creek, or are you looking for a infiltrator?
No, we're going to go, because we'll easily meet at the end of pipe, and it just makes more sense to,
Well, I mean,
to
yeah.
go, we'll get more credit on our augmentation side.
Yeah, if
And
you-
then really, what's happening to a lot of these systems, they're going to evaporative ponds. And we can't afford that, especially in Colorado, that all this water now gets evaporated and Indiana gets it through rain.
Well, and so just to kind of give everybody a little bit of that. So part of what the credit that you're talking about, if you pump 270 gallon and you return 90% of that, you get credit for that return flow
Correct.
instead of consumptive use.
And then
So-
you're maximizing your water rights.
Right.
And that just gives you that much more capacity then.
So, what, if for, so in one of the articles you mentioned that if you had to take this out of county, what is that? What does that amount to, Dave? How does that work? Like, I mean, some people are saying, well, I've read that they put it in the landfill, and then some people are like, well, we're going to take it to the Pueblo Army Depot, and I'm like, that don't make no sense. You think Pueblo takes their stuff out there? I mean,
Right.
so what would a guy do if he had to go out of county? What would that look like?
Or the Florence deal too, somebody mentioned.
Yeah, it would cost too much because they don't just take it for free. So when we looked at desludging up here, and quite honestly, guys, I never thought this would would gain this. I just thought it was my ignorance. So I went out to look for companies. There's like 3 major ones in the state. Because of our uniqueness where we couldn't draw the ponds down, we needed to find somebody that had a floating barge that can go in there. Well, there was only one of those companies. Denali was the one that had that equipment. So we struck a deal with Denali. We negotiated price, and they basically said, if we can find a spot within a 10-mile radius of the lagoons, that's your best bang for the buck. And that cost would be right around $300,000. And we've squirreled that money away and saved that. If they have to go off the hill because of our remote location and we got to go off a pass every way we have to do, they have 6,000 gallon tankers, and we've contracted 1.2 million gallons.
And so basically what they do though, I mean, so where's the end? If they take it down the hill, what would they be doing with it?
They would probably most likely have to go east of Colorado Springs to some large discharge fields that they have out there.
So they're talking about taking it out east of the springs and spreading the slurry.
So 200 loads.
They're you're not going to take it to Pueblo and put it in their system or
That's
something like that.
way too much for them. I mean, they'll take, they do take the little, tankers off of our little individual things, but they're not set up for another 1.2 million gallons.
Gotcha.
And they would look at it and say, hey, that's good enough. Just go land apply it, because that's what they do when they get done with theirs. They land apply it.
I just looking through a lot of that information. So it looks like about, if I remember right, about 54% of the total United States goes back on the land. Part of that goes to the landfills. How does that look, Dave? I mean, so I'd heard these guys talking a little bit about up here, and they were talking about, well, we can't potentially take it to our landfill because we have a dry landfill.
Correct.
Is there ever any way to dry this stuff out, or it's always a slurry?
If we were able, so we can't drop them because it's our primary treatment. If we, in a perfect world, could do like I first wanted to and switch it over, we would have dropped that down and actually done that. We would have come in and dry that out and just we were then able to take it to the dump as a dry cake. But it's in our situation and this uniqueness, we can't. So that's off the table for this. And for land application, it's actually, for us, it's inefficient because you're going to get a lot more water as that dredge comes up. So for land discharge, it's actually good because there's more water mixed than the typical sludge that they get when they dewater. So that is going to allow it to get into the ground faster because it has more ability to get through that surface and get down to where it's supposed to be. So that part is good. It's not good for us. I'm hoping to get 85% of the sludge out. I think I can have enough capacity then to accurately run the pilot study to do that. So I need to get, I need to get rid of this someplace, somehow.
Affordable.
And
Yes, in a way that we can,
well, so this was
so it's either 300,000 or a million.
So this was a big question for me too, is if, in a perfect world, if you got him emptied out, then potentially maybe you won't have sludge in the future. If this thing works like like you hope it would, then it would consume all the solids and it would never potentially
Right.
build up,
Yeah,
or it
the
would be a
little
long
amount-
time.
The little amount that's coming out, so another cool thing about when it runs through the electric coagulation unit, it actually creates a hydrophobic sludge. It actually automatically dewaters to about 21, 22%. So if you just have a flat area where you just let that dry, now you've got perfect stuff. I would recommend taking it to the dump and using it as topsoil because everything's in there. It fries all the viruses, bugs, neutralizes pharmaceutical, neutralizes nuclides. It's crazy, amazing, and super excited to get it going. But I've got this. This is the big challenge of. I can't do it on this one. I can't.
Well,
I need to.
So our first load, the problem that we're faced with is we've got an untreated situation where we've got to figure out.
I would say it's treated not as good as I can treat it with EC, but it's actually treated. So, the big concern that I've heard through the rumor mill is the problem with forever chemicals.
Right.
They
That's
don't want
all of
That's
that.
the only. That's really the
So,
biggest kicker
If
here.
you look on we have 3 parts per billion of PFOA, and Denali says that's extremely low. Usually they're in the 15 to 20 parts per billion with their typical sludge that they land apply.
And I don't know what it's worth, Dave, but I just asked Google, or I asked Chat GPT, and they say the new EPA regulations are 1 part per billion for
Oh,
sludge.
it's actually, there is no, right now EPA hasn't sent down any, there is no discharge limits. They're still trying to figure out what and who that looks like. So right now, Colorado on discharge, if any sludge gets over 50 parts per billion, that's when they go, okay, we need to figure out where that's coming from. So right now, Colorado doesn't have a limit to give to us because EPA hasn't sent it down. But just know the amount that we have. We did test our water about a year ago. The EPA sent out, basically gave us a free test. We have
For
nothing.
the forever chemicals,
Yeah.
you mean? Or?
And we have nothing. There was no sign of anything. So we are getting it through our clothes when we wash our clothes. I mean, through
Everything.
the carpets, through our seats in our cars, our sofas.
Yeah,
It's-
this stuff is great. They just don't understand
Right.
how great it really is or how detrimental. I mean,
So they have set, I think it's 4 parts per trillion
right.
for drinking water, which sounds really good, but it is so difficult to even take a sample. So
Well,
when
and-
I was at the Colorado Rural Water Conference talking with some of the big systems,
And that's where you were just this last week, right?
and talking with some of the operators that have to do that. And they said, what we found is we were getting so many false positives because the gloves that we always were using before,
There
just the handling of the outside was creating. So then they had to find a special glove. And then, like one said, you can't use Sharpies. The tip of the Sharpie is made out of PFOA and PFOS. And what was happening is they were writing the Sharpie on the outside, just that smell, that stuff, was enough to
Yeah.
get in and create a false positive.
Well, and, did you happen to hear where we'd come up with the analogy of how much 4 parts per trillion is?
Oh, it's,
So 4 parts per trillion in seconds is 31,800 years.
right.
So, I mean, that really is. I mean, you're talking about 4 grains of sand and 50 semi-loads of, or 4 drops in 50 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So, yeah, I have the
And
only
how do you
reason-
do that? You know, for us, in practical application, the amount of expense it gets to get to that, there's a cost and reward. If it takes so much money to get to that my constituents can't afford it, then what good is it? There needs to be, and it's a constant balance, and it's a constant negotiation with the state health departments. Because here's my problem with the whole PFOA, PFOS, forever chemicals. So if they are as bad as they claim to be, and the problem is, you know, I've looked at several studies and several papers on it. I've yet want to see one that conclusively, that says we have done this and we have conclusive evidence that if you take these in this certain amount, that you will get da 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 da. It's like, well, we see that it is linked to this. We see that it could be part of this problem. I have yet to see conclusive evidence. And I get nervous when people start putting crazy low limits on, and we really don't know yet the actual toxicity of this stuff. And then the other thing I really struggle with is I kind of imagine you have a dam and half of it's breached and it's just gushing. And then there's a little pinhole over here, and it's kind of like EPA said, we're going to take this pinhole, we're going to stuff our finger in it and look at us, while they're ignoring the whole discharge side.
Right.
So they sued the snot out of the manufacturers to a point of over $15 billion, but they haven't outlawed it.
Well, and that's the,
So it's like,
yeah, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, I was looking today, there's over 6,400 lawsuits, but like, why haven't they quit making this stuff?
Right.
Yeah, I agree
And
with you there.
to me, it's kind of like tobacco. We all know it's really bad stuff, but there's an economic advantage that it's like,
They keep making it.
right. So if it's really that bad, let's stop it. Let's do it. Let's get rid of it. Let's pull all of our carpet out. Let's pull our seats out of our cars. Otherwise, some of the argument that you have is a little duplicitous. So do I want it in there? No. And I'm really excited that we are offering
The
a
opportunity
treatment
to
that we
maybe,
can actually destroy it.
yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, because I've done quite a bit of research in a short amount of time. And I mean, it looks like electricity is the only way to shear that
Yep.
bond and to actually make that breakup happen. What's one of the things that's popped up, Dave, and I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but Denali's gotten in trouble before with over application. Do you work pretty close with what they're doing? Or, I mean, I know you contract with them. Do you just kind of let them take the reins, or do you watch
That
pretty
was my
close, or-
intent, because I have so many plates spinning and then they pretty much said, hey, sign on the dotted line and we'll pretty much take care of this for you. And that was probably my bad, that I probably should have been a little more into this. I did, when that came out, kudos to those regulators over there that slapped their hands like they're supposed to. I have checked, there hasn't been anything with the crew here that does it in Colorado. But yeah, they got,
One of the things that's came up and with the water conservation district, and I mean, I don't know. So I've grown up ranching in this county.
right,
Yeah.
place just don't.
Yeah. So I mean, I understand all that, but the Johnson Ranch is dried up. You don't have any irrigating water for it. I mean, some of the initial applications were talking about trying to grow 2.5 ton of winter wheat or 3 ton of hay. I mean, I think that they're kind of
That is that, yeah.
I don't
So-
think that they really understand what the climate is here. I mean, a lot of these guys are telling me that you're maybe looking at about 1/4 of ton of forage. So I mean, I just wonder if they did go ahead and let you do it, I don't think that you can get all the tonnage out there you want to do. So you're still going to be wondering what you're going to do with the rest of that. Do you got any idea about that, or?
So that's part of that CSU, the measurement type of thing. So almost all of that property now is just grazeland. But if you go out there, and of course we owned it for 20 years, there's a pretty established, there's a couple of spots, actually the spots that they're not gonna let us do have more bare spots than where we are. So there's a established grazing hay, or not hay, but grazed grass there. And they were surprised when they did soil samples that they found like a 4% organic material in that land, which is really
Wow.
unusual. And they said, if this is throughout the area that we're doing, it'll actually absorb pretty good because those roots that are already established will suck that stuff up. So it's not like it's just, and they said the problem that we have in those eastern Montana is there's nothing. It's just dirt with no organics at all, and it's really hard to get that stuff to get into the ground. There's just nothing there to absorb it.
And so what do you know, Dave, so out of the 1.2 million gallon, what percent of that would be solids? Do you have an idea about that, or approximately? I mean,
We did. So I met with the county commissioner, planning commission on Monday, just to get in there and say, hey, sorry that it seems like we haven't been talking. So some of the calculations that Jordan did are not correct. Like he claimed that we're doing 25 times or something, 21 times the amount that CSU says that we're supposed to put on that land.
well,
What
and
he
that's
mistook was he went total amount of solids compared to the amount of nitrogen. So we did the math there because there was 4 ranchers there that were very familiar with land applying fertilizer. So we went through what's here, the nitrogen that's available, and we figured out, the amount of pounds. We figured we went almost to the extreme and said, okay, if all of this was sludge, what would we be putting on? We'd be putting on about 8,000 gallons, a little over 8,000 to 9,000 gallons an acre, which is like a 1/4 of an inch of a rain, if not even that.
Right.
And then the amount of nitrogen that would be putting on is only 30% of what they normally put on with your commercial fertilizers that they put on. They're like, oh, this isn't that big of a deal. So of course, trying to get that out there, because of course I look like I'm coming from a vested area saying, oh, it's not that big of a deal. But when you really do the math on this, it is not bad at all. So we figured just under 2 tons an acre, I think, is what we were doing with actual solids.
Got it. Yeah, very interesting. I mean, there's, in my opinion, in 10 years, right? In 10 years, we'll know what really has happened. The technology will be advanced enough.
Correct.
The testing, I mean, Jimmy and I both kind of done some testing. So, when I test a lot of my products in the cannabis world, right? I mean, they test that stuff, but then they try to tell you, well, it's only a plus or minus 20%. And I'm like, how the heck you're supposed to look for 4 parts per trillion on a
Right.
test? So, I mean, I have a lot of reservations about the testing of all of that stuff and how accurate that would be. And I mean, it's so infinite in this point in time.
Well, there's a lot of unknown, and that,
Yeah.
of course, creates uncertainty. It's like, nah, I'm gonna lean on the safe side and say, no, not ever. I comes like, okay, there's a pragmatic reality. We have to be able to desludge this to get the actual fix in place.
So,
And we have to do it in an affordable way, otherwise this whole thing grinds to a halt again.
And what does that mean? The whole thing grinds to a halt. Where are we at with that?
So I need to desludge the ponds. CDPHE initially has given me 180 days from the day of approval to get the pilot study going. That means
The clock started?
the clock has started already.
So we got a 180-day countdown?
Correct. Now I probably can get at least one extension. If I don't get it in that, then we'd have to reapply and go through the whole.
And David, what does that really mean? You've got 180 days to, what do we got to accomplish in that
well, yeah,
time?
and so that's something that, everybody says, okay, the state's after us or whatever. I mean, ultimately, if they completely drop the hammer on us, I mean, can they shut you down? Is that the ultimate end goal here? Or?
Technically it can, but I can't stop people using their toilets. I
Well, you
mean,
could shut their water off.
Yeah, well, I do like my life, and I actually can't. I actually can't as a certified operator because that would create a health crisis, and I'm by law not my. I pledge to provide safe drinking water for my constituents. I cannot.
You pledged, you didn't take an oath? You're not a commissioner, are you?
Yeah,
You're not an elected official, are you?
I
You
am
didn't get
not.
elected, did you, by the
I
people?
didn't.
So that's kind of what I wanted to kick around a little bit too, is the obligation that the commissioners have to the whole county.
Well, and that's
And I don't
something-
want to get into that too much.
that's-
I sure appreciate you being here. I have learned so much. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I did too, Dave. We appreciate you.
Right, and I know, the problem, it's such a unique situation out here, so usually the towns this side own a municipality.
Right.
But we have two sister towns, and one of the reasons that they peeled off into a special district, well, number one, the Clean Water Act came and they're like, we don't want to.
It had nothing to do with
Yeah.
it.
And then they realized that if one owned the other, there would be constant war. So let's just be customers, and we'll have this entity then manage the water and sanitation. So
What would it ever look like, Dave, to maybe potentially get the county and the towns involved to maybe try to generate some more money for this? Is that, I mean, would that ever be a possibility, or?
I'll take money from anybody. Usually what happens is when it comes down to writing the check, they pretty much say, hey, you run on, it's your responsibility. That's why we made you. The towns say, we're not your parents, we're your customers. That has been the responses.
I was a little disappointed and not super bad, but I talked with Paul. I seen him the other day at lunch, Paul Winkie, the mayor of Westcliffe, and I asked him, I said, Paul, are you going to go over and check this out? And he said, no, I'm just going to wait for the papers to report on it. And I thought, man, come on, man. I mean, this is your town. You should be a little bit, at least a little more proactive. They almost act like it doesn't concern them, but yet it does.
Right, it does have a mentality. So they view themselves as customers, and we provide that service. So whatever the challenge is, it's Round Mountain's challenge. And
Well, it really is. I mean, at the end of the day,
it is.
But if you got skin in the game, I mean, if you're involved in this, I mean, Paul owns, I mean, there's people, you right here near, I mean, everybody has a little bit of skin in the game here. So the group of people in the leadership, 3 commissioners, 2 mayors, and then you've also got all these committees. I mean, to get all those people together and say, hey, we need to get a powwow, this is a very serious issue. And all for it to land on Round Mountain just seems kind of derelict.
Well,
I mean, it's just,
Well, the challenge is my funding capabilities are really limited because I can't do property taxes throughout the whole
No, your
the whole
district,
county.
your district
My
is,
district is what I
is
had.
only so big, so
Right.
you're only going to get so much.
And the poor people live in the towns.
So
the
here,
wealthier people live out.
Right.
here again, I live outside. I've got my own well. I've got my own and I moved up here intentionally for that. I did build in the towns for a minute, and then I was like, this is going to blow up one day. So it's blowing up now, somewhat. Anyways, hopefully it's a controlled blow up.
I'm hoping, because I have a solution and I want to get the solution going.
So my thing is I am just when I started doing research, because I knew about this stuff 20 years ago, and that's why we moved up as high as we could to stay out of this.
Right.
And
Yeah.
now it's
To
right
be
on me
first users,
because
we're first users.
my cattle are right there. We're going to discharge this stuff. I helped a couple of ranches right there at the site of where it's going to go. So I definitely have some red
You got
flags.
some
that are-
skin in the game.
Yeah, I'm like, wait a minute. We
That's appropriate
pride
concern.
ourselves on clean beef. We pride ourselves on a lot of things, and we have a very unique environment that we're in charge of to keep this place clean. And with the image, just the image alone of somebody saying, ooh, maybe, the water that you guys are using could be somewhat contaminated. We don't know. And why I say that is there's 20 million plus acres, that followed somewhat suit on what the EPA said was safe. Have you done that? Do you know about any of that?
Oh, yeah, I've done some study on that. And
So that's just shooting from a cowboy seat. You know what I mean?
Correct.
That's just going, wait a minute. Why would these people that have had
The
a
part,
ranch or
the part that doesn't make any sense to me, Dave, is why the state won't work with you to fire off the secondary lagoon. That seems to me to be.
boy, that's a little funny.
I mean that would be in my opinion, that would be the solution, because then we don't have to worry about if the forever chemicals are as bad as they say they are in 10 years. We can't pull it back. If we could do that and get it to dry out and take it to the landfill, I mean, there just ain't nothing a guy can do
in
to
a perfect
try.
world, that would be. Yeah,
Boy, that
but
would be the answer, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
and
but
why
it's
they
not.
would cripple us with that
They
kind
would.
of legislation.
It's the biggest kudo already that we actually got them to allow us to work with new emerging technology. That is a
'Cause
huge
this whole-
feather in my cap.
This whole
because-
thing is a pilot program.
Right.
then.
And because of that, they are going to withhold anything so that if, worst case scenario, this all burns in a mighty big heap, that they won't have anybody coming back and saying, hey, why did you allow Round Mountain to do that? And they say, hey, we didn't, we made them. And that's just a reality that you've got to work with. As unfair or nonsensical as it seems, that is the reality of this. That is the only way they're going to allow us to do this. I need to find a home for this. My argument is it has a minimal amount. It does have traces of the PFAS, but comparatively to the normal loading of the biosolids that are going out there, it is extremely low. I'm hoping to only use it twice for this big one, and then once we get it approved, we'll actually do that. We'll get the second train going. We'll do the appropriate settling down, and if we don't cake out, we might do a little sludge there, but then I would project that we're done. That after we get the electric regulations unit, that's it. We're done. We don't need to use it anymore.
Well, I mean that might be that would be a huge step in my opinion for mankind, because I think that they're going to find in the next 10 years that, once the science gets more advanced, where they can really determine and discover what it is and what it does, if there's a way to eliminate the sludge and eliminate a lot of the PFAS with the electricity, I mean, that sounds like like I said, a huge step for mankind.
I'm excited. Quite honestly, I'm selfishly want to get this approved and I'm gonna go work for Power Water, and I'm gonna sell a million of these.
So what I was going to ask too is, what is the cost for this new system? Electricity wise, is it is that pretty affordable?
It actually is. It's usually about, what is it, 3 to 5 volts between plates. So it really isn't
That's
the amount of
minute.
voltage. It's actually the amount of surface contact that it can be with the plates. That is the trick of the effective electrocoagulation. So I did a initial cost analysis. We have 5 of these aerators that we run 24/7.
Okay.
And it'll probably be a quarter to a third more cost than it is right now of running those.
Okay.
So we are not talking double, tripling. And then what we're doing is actually looking at, so we have that 40 acres up there where we discharge now. When we're done, what are we going to do with that? I'm not going to sell it to people because they got huge infiltrator beds. Nobody wants to build up there. So we're looking, talking with a solar array company, and we were already starting to negotiate. What we, in my perfect world, is we want to lease in between to make that another income stream that doesn't affect our people. So we're negotiating a lease plus energy credits that would actually pay for our wastewater treatment and our water treatment, effectively making us net neutral.
Absolutely thinking out of the box here. That's awesome. Yeah, really do. So you've actually dumped some of this stuff on a 40-acre place that you guys got that's a controlled deal.
Yeah, that's what we're doing now. We're discharging on that because that's our only place to put it.
It's the only where to go.
And in that little area, it's amazing how it sinks in. 70,000 gallons,
Well, so
80,000 gallons a day we put out there. And
Expound, if you can, a little bit, Dave. What's going on there? I mean, if we were talking about the perk test to start with, plugs, but why is that specific area there able to consume all that or absorb all that water?
because it's the Garden of Eden right now, so you have a lot of uptake from plants.
I got you.
And then just our dry climate, I would probably say at least 50% of it evaporates.
Gotcha.
So we usually do that we just started it yesterday, and we started from late March to the end of December, when the ground gets froze too hard. And then we cross our fingers and try to put it in these.
In the ponds and hold the ponds?
No, we put them in the old,
Underground stuff?
we play whack-a-mole.
Gotcha. See which one comes to the
and when we
surface?
see it, we move it over here, and we see it, we move it over here, and it's like, and we look at each other, it's like,
Whack-a-mole.
one day, this ain't gonna work anymore. One day, it's gonna be, we don't have any place to put this. Our whack-a-mole it's gone 8 years longer than I thought it ever would. So we need to find,
We're on borrowed time.
we are on borrowed time. We need to find a solution. And kudos to CDPHE, they could have easily fined us because, we're 10 years in compliance.
In the other counties that are comparable to us, there's 64 counties in Colorado? How many other counties are teetering on, or where are they at in this situation? Do you know? Do you have that information?
So, starting in 2027, Regulation 31 will come in, and will require virtually all wastewater treatment systems in the state, big, small, little, or tall, to start removing nutrients. And a lot of those will be one day they're in compliance, the next day they're going to be out of compliance, because those little systems were never designed to do that. So what I want to do is, by that time, is offer a solution. So you're talking about cost. So
And the reason why we got spotlighted is because our infiltrator plugged up, and the state come up here and found out what was going on. That's kind of how we got in the spotlight.
we went from the bottom of the pile to the top of the pile. So,
Quite an
the
interesting world we got.
frustrating part is this all if the stream wouldn't have been classified as impaired, we would have had a treatment system in 2018, easy, 2018.
So you would have been able to discharge into the stream
Yep.
if the stream. Now, when you say that, is the stream already contaminated so much you can't add to it?
Correct. Literally, right now, if we met our discharge limits, it would be 100 times cleaner than what's coming down the stream.
And what is that? What is the stuff that's contaminating the water upstream? What is causing all of that? Are we, as a county, as a state, are we combating some form of?
My frustration is that no, and that is a frustration of mine. That, you know, we have this talk of wanting to preserve, and I am just right there with you. The beauty of this valley, the simplicity, the lack of grow up.
Well, you can't get any further up the hill than here.
Right. So the reality is we have a 21-mile stretch from where Grape Creek comes out of Music Pass there to Deweese. And somewhere in that, it is getting compromised enough that the federal government says, hey.
Has anybody, Dave, ever went along through different corridors and tested to try to see where that's taken place?
Can we narrow
and that's
that down?
The other frustrating part is when the EPA does that, the state health department, I think, has a 5-year limit where they are supposed to go up and try to figure out where these sources of pollution are coming. We are little fry and we get ignored. I talked last April with that part of the agency and said, why aren't you guys doing? You're supposed to go up here, and by this time you're supposed to establish a maximum contaminant level and daily loading on this stream, and you haven't done squat. And then they say, hey, last year they were supposed to start at Deweese and figure out what was in Deweese, and I checked on that. Nobody came up. So I'm disappointed that Custer County hasn't seen it as a significant enough problem. I call it that it's socially accepted pollution.
Do we have a group of people that are in charge of it? Is there a committee or a group of people that are involved in the water conservation thing? Is there somebody that does that? I mean, isn't there, what is it, NRCS or somebody like that?
The state health department's supposed to do it, but they're usually underfunded, overworked, and so it's just not happening. And of course, my frustration then is when the state regulators set my preliminary effluent limits, they're supposed to have all that information, maximum contaminant level, daily loadings.
They don't have none of
They
that.
want it. So it's just a guess your best. It was like, so what do they do? If it's CYA, we are going to give you the strictest limits so nobody can come back to us and say, why did you allow Round Mountain to have those limits? So I would argue that our limits are asinine. Some of them, I mean,
Well,
take for instance arsenic. So in our drinking water system, the state health department says you can have up to 10 parts per billion of arsenic in your water before you have to start removing it. The state on my discharge limit has not said you need to get from 10 to 1, not even 0.1. They want us to get to a 0.02 parts per billion. There is no lab in the state that can measure that low.
And that seems,
What do you
So the tail's wagging the dog here, and
well,
some
and
of
I
this
mean, because
stuff.
let's be realistic. It would only take one day for somebody to come up with the sampling kits and take these samples and then go back to the lab and see where.
I was trying to convince them, that this is a perfect. We only have 20 miles. It's not like you have 200-300 miles like most of the other streams. I mean, you're going to find it if you just start sampling. Okay, here's where this tributary comes in. We did our own. I did 2017. I did a phosphorus off the bridge there at Giroux's place there, just down off.
Oh, off Hermit, yep.
Hermit, right?
And I did it for a year, and the first heavy rain at the end of May, because that's when, that fertilizer that was put in that low and wet area just sloughed off into there, and it shot up May and June, started to level out in July, And then so it's kind of this, and the problem is that it gets stuck in Deweese. So, but that loading is now getting to a point where you can't swim in it anymore. It's dangerous, but there's just too many nutrients that are still coming down. And I'm disappointed that I want the amount of criticism, the amount of looking at this, the amount of concern that we're having with this. I would like to see that
spread around
on this concept that, dudes, we're living in this beautiful valley, and our beautiful little Grape Creek is listed as impaired. It's polluted. Why are you okay with that? I'm not okay with that. I want to get it fixed. And of course, we have a direct impact that it negatively impacts. It's cost us 10 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to get a treatment solution that will work with that impaired stream. So we have a vested interest in it. It has significantly negatively impacted our little water district. So I want scrutiny on both sides.
Amen.
To be fair and equitable and to be intellectually honest about this. Let's not get selective in our righteous indignation and moral outrage. Let's be honest and look and say, hey, we really need to look at this also.
And I think making a bad situation even worse is what I'm more concerned about.
And I would
leave it
agree
right
with
there.
you if I said, you know what, every 5 years I'm going to be dumping this there. You know, my argument again, it's really as far as land application, biosolids, it's about as good as you can get, and the minimal amount of stuff that's in there is going to make a very minimal impact. And again, we all make these judgment calls. I drove my car here. I know that I just put some poisonous fumes into the air, but I've made a call that says the value of my ability to be mobile supersedes the amount of pollution that I put in. So we have to make these we all do. Every day we make these judgment calls. And so, yeah, I'm looking. If it isn't that place, boy, I really need a spot within a 10-mile radius to make this work.
Another place to
somebody else's backyard.
Well, I'm just going to say further downstream, the better for me. And I don't even like to think in them terms.
Right. But
And Steve and I are both, it's like, what is the real solution here? We don't harm anybody. We don't take what we have generated as a toxic thing and then give it to that somebody else has got to solve it. And
Right.
It's like we need to be personally responsible for what we've done here. And now it's exposed to a lot of other things too. I mean, where's the contamination coming in on the creek?
Well, and
further up?
that seems silly to me that they couldn't get that done in one day.
Absolutely.
In 5 years. Just
Yeah.
get it done in
One
5
day
years.
in 5 years.
And you're talking about just a simple sample. We're not talking about parts per trillion. You're just trying to find where the nitrogen or the phosphate
where do you find a
concentration-
spike? Where do you
Yeah.
find this
Yeah, that
this
doesn't
tributary is coming in and we're getting higher readings. We need to maybe walk up here and see what's going
Well,
on.
you can almost walk the creek. I mean, I get exposed to it just because of the ranches that I'm on. I get exposed to that. To great.
That sounds like part of the Biden administration to me.
So I'm hoping that, I'm hoping we don't have to go off the hill with it because it will slow down. So what happens in that, you kind of asked that. If that slows down, it slows down my plant. We have to start renegotiating with CDPHE, which I try to do as minimal as possible.
Right.
We also, remember we had a moratorium for a while.
Yeah, it was a self-imposed moratorium.
Right, because I just didn't have a place to put the poop. So when we started really talking turkey with CDPHE and they were now favorable, it's like, okay, I need another income stream to help us with this. So it's this dicey ships passing in the night kind of thing. If I allow these houses to be built, it's gonna take at least a year, year and a half from the time that they get the tap, then they'll actually start producing waste and demand on my system.
The cost.
Right, well, they'll actually start flushing their toilets.
Yeah. So
It'll take a year, year and a half to get everything built and people living in there. At that time, I've got this system and this pilot coming in, and what I'm hoping is that we kind of meet in the middle, where when that demand comes, I now have sufficient capacity to meet that extra demand. If this gets too far, we've got to stop again and say, sorry guys, we don't have place for this, and we're going to have to put a moratorium on again because
Well,
I don't have a potential solution in any of a short time frame.
that's one of the things, Dave, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me either with the low-income housing, because we're already stressed with money. Here you are, you need to generate revenue, and they want you to try to take it for free. And
Yeah, I can't. I wish I could, but again, I'm not the federal government. We only get, so just to let you know, only 8% of our income every year comes from property taxes. So we live on the fees that we
generate.
generate. That's it. Or other, income streams that I can find to subsidize that.
What when are they trying to get you to have the reservoir up and running?
Yesterday.
Yeah, I know. I deal with them guys all the time. We've been
So we're to a point, well, like I said, we got it 75% funded, so we got it kicked back from from the state's first review of it. There's only one big annoying thing. They want us to do a big riprap on the bottom of the west slope so that if we have a biblical flood, that it will protect it. But we did 500, even 1,000-year flood projections, and it would never, the whole valley would float away before it even got
Well, and
close
so
to that.
they were at one point they were talking about maybe going clear upstream and trying to gravity feed that, but now from what I hear, maybe you guys are looking at more closer to the reservoir and just pumping the water in there.
Yeah, so, we got that
Cheaper?
alternative source or place there because the water table for digging down deep, and usually you dig down to try to do a reservoir. Well, the water table at the ranch is just simply too
It's
high.
close to the
So then you're
surface.
going to have to bring in all this fill to, it just was economically infeasible. So we did apply, and they gave us an alternative storage place there just south of town. The problem is it's on the bluff, and the creek is
So
down there.
yeah,
So
gotta
how the
get
heck
up
do I
there.
get from point A to point B? We did look at that concept of what would it take to gravity feed. Well, it was like
Mile
almost,
upstream.
no, it was almost 4 miles.
Oh, really?
Oh, to get the elevation.
Yeah, to get the elevation. Well, that didn't cost out. That was crazy. And then
A
we
lot of
did,
pipe.
okay, can we go over in McGuire's land? And because we have wetlands right below us, so you want to stay away from that, or it's 10 years of red tape with CDPHE to even touch that. So you're like, no touching. We're staying away from that. So we did, but it was going to cost like $2 million to get water pumped from there and back. And then that then shot it out of the realm of economic feasibility. So we went to Division of Water Resources and said, hey, right now you are claiming that my municipal well is directly related to the stream because I have to pay gallon per gallon back when I pump that. So if you're saying that that is directly connected to the stream, I would make the argument that I can make that my discharge point, that I can divert from the stream out of that. Because if I can't, then you're going to have to tell me why you claim that it's. And fortunately, they said, you know what? Yes, we'll let you do that. So we're actually going to use that municipal well when it's not in use. Well, that saved us $2 million right there on the spot.
So is this in your waters coming out of Macy? What is the water right that you guys are on that
So
you're
we
having
have-
to satisfy?
So we have water rights on Macy. So we have 4 senior water rights on Macy. We don't drink that water. That's just payback water. you could say.
That's your exchange.
That is, so that we pay the state back for water that we lose from evaporative loss, transit loss, here loss, there loss. If you've been, you know that there's
Oh, my
million
Lord.
losses. So we use that to pay that back, and if we're out of priority. So we never drink that. It's just water that we bank that we pay back to the state. And if we have extra, then we might look into short-term leases if we have extra as for another income stream. So it'll be good to have the reservoir. The timing just really, really stinks. It couldn't happen at a worse time.
So what would be the optimal place for the storage? Is it Macy that you've got to take it out of?
Yes, I have to take it out of, but it's shepherded. So Macy goes to Grape Creek, and the state is fine as long as you shepherd that diverted water, shepherd it through everything, and we've been shepherding it all the way down to Deweese.
To Deweese,
But
right.
we're going to cut it off.
You want to do a higher storage is what
Right.
I'm looking
So
at.
Division of Water Resources wants it above our area of depletion. So that has to be just right above what we call the gallery well. So it's 30 feet, but it's above. So that satisfied that requirement. And it will be nice to have that as a management tool. It will. It just, again, another bucket of water to have for storage. You just can't store enough water because it's gold. So then that adds to our water portfolio and our ability to, we could even, if at some time we need to punch another well in, we have enough water to actually augment that.
How many acre feet, Dave, does that estimate that reservoir?
150 acre foot.
150.
And that's coming out of Macy?
Yeah, it comes out of Macy, but that doesn't matter, right? Because like you
Right.
said, Macy is tributary to Grape Creek, and they're shepherding, or they're causing that water to be diverted and put back in at the metering device on the Johnson Ranch, goes back in the stream and comes down to the other point of diversion and divert it there. Nobody else. So that the non-consumptive flow, another head gate can divert that.
Correct.
The water that they consumptive use has to come downstream. Everybody has to let it go
Has
by.
to let it go by.
Yeah.
So we get about a half gallon for every gallon that went on the ranch. So we get, on a really good year, we can get about 240 acre feet of consumptive use off those.
So what is the quickest, highest elevation that you could pull out of can you pull it out of Macy, or do you have to get it out of Grape?
But so I mean, you can pull it out of Macy, but that's the whole say. So expound, Dave, about the reservoir. Why you
Right,
don't
so
put a reservoir on?
We don't have any, we didn't put a reservoir on there. You could have pulled it right off a diversion ditch and stored it. But since it was such a poor storage area, it doesn't matter where it is. So Division of Water Resources didn't matter where it is, just as long as your storage area is above your first point of depletion, which is that
So
gallery
that's
well.
like the only place that really makes sense to store that much water. Otherwise, you're talking about how you're going to store it on the flats, right?
Right, and you just can't. It's not economic feasible.
Yeah, because when you get too deep, then you're in the groundwater. You can't
And then
do
it's
that.
all
So
bubbling up, and then the state gets all hyperventilated about mixing wild water and your water, and
yeah, really, where they put the reservoir is about the only option there.
it is.
Got it. Yeah. So you got hardship after hardship that
Yeah,
we're
and
looking
then
at.
just to add on to this, our distribution system was 2 old towns. So Silver Cliff's distribution, their first water mains were put in 1879, and we're still using quite a bit of that. And then you got Westcliffe that kind of started in right at 1900 and 10s, 20s, 30s. That was kind of patched together. So when the district was formed, they just kind of crippled those two separate systems together, and our distribution system's pathetic. It is. I mean, we're trying to work with the hand that we're dealt, but now we're getting to a point where we have enough development where, okay, our mains are insufficient size, and our water storage is insufficient. So in my perfect world, we need to essentially 90% of the system we need to upsize.
Yeah, I've been involved in
And then,
under a few manhole covers there as a
And
plumber.
then-
So yeah.
and then we only have 250,000 gallons of finished water storage, and we really need 1 million gallons of finished water storage.
So we got challenge after challenge after
That's
challenge.
15.
So we need a GoFundMe.
Yeah, that's a $15 to $20 million project.
We need a big GoFundMe.
I have no idea where that's coming from, and I actually hope that I retired, and that'll probably be somebody else's. My goal is to get this.
Well, then that's another talking point about the low-income housing, right? I mean, they want low-income housing, but how does that help support the infrastructure? I mean, they think that stuff all comes at no cost.
Well, and then we got the Justice Center that could house 20 or 30 people too.
Yeah, you just have to realize that there's a demand both on the water side and the wastewater side. And of course, because we don't see that, that is so often taken off the table.
Right.
And then it's an unpleasant reality later than we're the bad guys.
And that's where we're at now.
Yeah. And of course, now Westcliffe has allowed accessory dwelling units to be built on almost any lot.
Which is bizarre.
That's a significant, I mean, I can understand the reasoning behind it, try to find some small places for cheaper rent. But they never got with us and said, hey, what is it going to take to
accommodate it.
Yeah, to connect with your existing, are you going to allow us to connect to an existing water and sewer tap when our existing rules and regulations say no? How do we work with that? So we're working this whole year of like, okay, how do we appropriately charge for this extra demand that's going to be on the system that's equitable? And because what usually happens is the poor single resident gets beat up. I mean, they usually take the whole expense and then split it out to everybody. And I'm saying, no, the people that are creating demand need to pay for the expense
Right.
of that and quit beating on the poor single residential person. So we're going to probably be doing, we'll be back in the paper in January because we're probably going to be doing what's called the equivalent residential unit type of charge fee for places that have more than one living unit on it, so that we can appropriately get those people to pay for that extra demand. And there'll be some pushback on that.
One thing, Dave, that somebody had to ask me about, and I kind of forgot to ask you, so it had to do with the testing. So, I mean, how often do you guys test the lagoon or the infiltrator, or potentially, I mean, I can only, like if you end of pipe, that would be like a continuous testing mechanism, wouldn't it? Or
So the state and their discharge permit, they write all that out, what the requirements and the amount per month. Most of it's in reporting, it's once a month. We'll actually do, well, we're going to do a gobload of sampling on the pilot study, so we can actually see as it goes through the process. So we're building we'll have a little lab out there, and I'm going to get the guys trained to do some basic stuff, so we don't have to send everything out. But it'd be good for us to know that and learn that.
right.
But it will be a fairly robust sampling paradigm. It always is when you're meeting end of pipe. So
So would that be one? I mean, so it's sort of like a smart meter, or you would actually just go out and get a sample and then take it to
some of it you can do, the technology is getting out there where you have 24/7, like dissolved oxygen, for instance. You have 24/7 monitors. You can get 24/7 for some of the nitrogen. But some of it's still, like BOD, it's a 5-day process to establish that you can't do a quickie on. So some of it's going to be, as we get in, I've already been looking at new technology as far as automated, as minimal amount of footprint or people boots on the ground as possible, because that's the only way we can afford it. So right now the projected concept is that boots on the ground probably 2 or 2.5 hours a day once the full build out is there, and the rest of it kind of runs itself. And then a lot of it we can actually run from SCADA, and we have from a dashboard on our phones we can turn off, and check some of the basic things. And that's how we can survive. We can't do a 24/7 crew. We just cannot afford that.
Got it. So the 3-alarm fire that myself included, when I heard about this, my biggest concern was
Did we get it down to 2-alarm foot?
No, it's actually probably a 10 alarm now. So at the end of the day, people that have nice ranches and good water rights that are downstream from where this is being entertained, they have legitimate concern just because of all the experiment and stuff, the water and land that has been contaminated with the approval of EPA. Is that a real concern, or are we overreacting with that? Is that legitimately something that? I mean, we're not being blinded by we only have so much money and we're going to have to do
because
this.
I mean, are you willing to basically put your grandchildren's children's children? Are you willing to put them at risk over that? I mean, that's one of the questions we had, is how confident are you in all this stuff? Because, I mean, that's really what's at stake. If these chemicals are what they say they are, and we somehow infiltrate our whole system with them, I mean,
it's an ecosystem here that we cannot afford. And I understand that we've got a little contamination in it already, and I'm concerned about that. But putting more,
Right.
causing it to be even more so.
But that's the thing, right? I mean, I think the elephant in the room here is not the nitrogen or phosphate. We can take care of that. I'm surprised that the state hasn't tried to test to see where it's coming from. But it's the forever chemicals, right, that'll never be able to, once a guy takes that step, he can never go back.
Once you unleash that cat's out the barn, you know what I mean?
So where I'm coming from, I would say in areas that have been discharging for years and years, and that amount of forever chemical has built up to a significant problem.
It's a toxic state is what we'd have to...
So just to know that, as a side comment, CDPHE's mission statement is no toxins in toxic amounts, because they know that there's no way that you can remove 100%. My argument is this is a one-time, essentially, maybe in 3 years, a little one, but I think probably what we'll do is what we're going to find is any of that stuff that's left in there with putting our diffusers down below, that is actually going to bring that stuff up, and a lot of that will be treated. But there probably, once we rehabilitate that, there's going to be some, but it's probably going to be a small amount that it makes sense for us to just come in and dry it and cake it and send it out.
Absolutely.
So we're really talking one time, we're talking 3 parts per billion, which is so far under what we would call the normal discharge. The amount of like lead in that, they're so trace that I know it sounds like 1.2 million gallons is a lot, but it really isn't on that small of an area. And I think it's going to get into that ground. And yes, you could say that is a benefit risk ratio assessment. I would argue that it's an acceptable benefit risk ratio.
Taking into account your grandkids as kids.
Yep.
And so just, what did you mean, Dave, about the 3 parts per billion? I mean, so did you guys have it tested?
We did have it tested.
And you know that it's that level there, or?
Yep. Yeah. I didn't bring the PFAS test, but I did bring
Well, that was the biggest thing we were concerned about. The other stuff, you know, we, as farmers, Steve and I are both farmers. I mean, we
So this is from Denali when they looked at some of the things that were coming out and being written. This was some of their bullet points of saying, oh, let's not quite.
We want to combat
not
the
quite
rumors.
accurate, right?
Okay.
If you don't mind.
No. So the last thing it talks about.
And they tested for multiple, I mean, from
We
what I
tested,
understand,
I think
there's
there was-
9,000 different ones.
There's 12,000 technically. I think they tested, oh golly, there had to been at least 200. I mean, there was like 4 pages, really small, of all the.
And those are the ones you're testing per billion or trillion, or what is the
Most of
test?
this is per billion, parts per billion.
Parts per billion. Yeah, I mean, I heard that and I was like, man, we do parts per million. And
Yeah,
that was
parts
pretty
per million is
bizarre.
going away now, and which of course, as an operator, is really challenging to get consistently at those low limits. I mean,
Yeah, and it just rang an alarm in me. It's like if it's that toxic where we've got to scale up to trillion, even a billion,
right.
that just seems like it's.
They haven't convinced me yet, and I'm not yet convinced because.
You don't
There's-
mind if I take a picture of this?
No, or you can have it if you
Oh,
want to.
perfect. That'd be great.
I got it.
I mean, we're trying to get to the very bottom of this, and there's so much. I mean, that's, they were first they were talking about, well, there's X a ton and it's dry, and they're going to haul it in dump trucks, and then it's like,
Yeah,
no. So I mean, there's just so much.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I know the rumor mill can get going, and
It is
I didn't.
Westcliffe.
Yeah, and I didn't want it to happen. I should have got on the front end, but know that we're not going to be doing the midnight manure spreader run out to the.
So know that this podcast is here to be able to communicate to the people that live here. This is the voice of the people by the people.
Yep.
You're you're a person that lives here too. You got skin in the game. And we are on an island here. It's something worth protecting. I moved here intentionally for what it offered. I didn't move here because I didn't research it. I researched this and came up and visited with people and said, okay, there's one little slice of Americana left here, and I want to enjoy this. Now that I'm 62 years young, I'm thinking about, someday retirement's going to come, and I don't want to wake up with high taxes, pollution, and all that. You know what I'm saying? So in the big pictures of things, it's I appreciate this place, and I feel like I'm privileged to be here, and I want to be a steward of it, and I'm going to do my best to increase our odds of not going backwards.
Yep. And
So-
I
so-
echo that, and that's my.
I believe you. I believe you do. I'm just concerned that we're taking a risk that's I don't know. It's
Right.
just
And-
it
and
scares me.
I respect that.
Yeah, it
That's why I
scares
said-
me when there's
I'll
20
tell-
million acres of people
I'll
that
tell you in
nodded their
10
head and
years
said, yeah.
what the answer really
So,
is. Right?
and to me, if I were a commissioner, I would say I am a trustee and I cannot put anybody at risk. And with the uncertainty of all of this, I would take the highest road I could find. Personally, that's just me. That's my ethics and my integrity.
And here's the ornery part about that. I agree with you, but they're also not. They want to take the highest road, but yet they want to put all the blame on Dave instead of taking some of the responsibility. And
We're going to get into a whole different conversation here in a minute, and absolutely. And Steve and I have talked about that, Dave. We're not absolutely. We're looking at going, how come we didn't have some kind of camaraderie with the 2 mayors, the 3 commissioners, and all the other committees that are involved?
Jimmy
in it?
talked with the mayor of Silver Cliff, and I mean, they weren't really receptive at all, right? I mean, they're like, well, it's not our problem. And that doesn't seem to
Right,
me
and
to be
that's the
fair.
mentality.
Yeah, that's not
Well,
fair.
that just sounds to me like here you are. You're representing, what is there, 700 or 900 people in Silver Cliff?
707, I think, in Silver Cliff right
So
now.
I thought Buck said 900 when I talked to
It
him.
might be.
So,
I think that was-
anyways, and then there's like 700 or so in Westcliffe.
It's about 550.
So 550. So here again, we got a pretty consolidated group of people, and I'm going to throw this out there as like everybody. We're going to throw whatever the amount is, a monthly deal for sewer maintenance or discharge maintenance, whatever that might be. Not to cripple them, but and then maybe even the commissioners may need to look at it. I don't know how much revenue that the county receives from the 2 towns. Does anybody know that number? And should some of that be allocated to solve the problem here? Looking at this, the leadership to me looks like it's not really where it should be. The common sense approach, knowing that we have, a situation that's approaching that's very damning if we don't handle it proper.
Right.
Here's one that came through, Dave, if you would. It says, and I'm not sure if they mean if this is for the forever chemical or with the fertilizer, but it says, what exactly do the regs allow insofar as groundwater, ? Surface water, ? Is there a risk of surface water contamination? Have you quantified the risk, and how about surface water? So I guess I really don't understand does that make any sense? Or
But what they're probably worried about is what is the risk of intrusion into
the surface
into
water
into the creek. I'm really, since they pushed that back to now 200 feet. This is really level ground, so it's really not susceptible to torrential runoff because it's just stinking level.
Yeah, but that does have a pitch to it.
Not much.
Yeah, but it does. It definitely is pitched. It's not pitched away from Grape Creek. All of that land pitches down to Grape.
Right.
I mean, they did level it. Didn't you say that they leveled it back in
Well, but
70 or something?
what they did is they just smoothed
Knocked
it.
the
They
hills
did-
down.
Yeah,
Right,
they
they
didn't
just-
level it. Otherwise, on one end you'd have like a
500-foot deal.
a huge berm.
So I don't know what the grade is, but I'm very familiar because the ranch that I help with is right across the street from it. And that's my skin in the game.
Right.
I just happen to be.
So
Part-
I would
part
say
of the podcast.
with the new setback and the amount of liquid that is in that will be spraying, I think that will immediately be absorbed into that ground and it's not going to go anywhere. Would be my argument.
So what is the chances of if somebody had cattle grazing out there that some of this stuff would go through the plant and into the cow?
Yeah. Happens already.
So here again, I'm glad
And
that.
then of course, when we're talking teeny itsy bitsy amounts, if we were talking here, I would say, yeah, you have a legitimate, I would argue that, man, the amount of negative impact with that small amount, a one-time deal, you're talking really,
Minute.
you are talking minute.
Well, when we're testing stuff in these millions and trillions of stuff, and somebody said there was a test out there was in quadrillions. I'm going, oh, wow. So now we're really getting there.
If no use if you can't measure it.
And that's my really concern is
Is it just feel goodism?
how
or is it
accurate
legitimate?
how accurate are these tests? I guess I'm just it looks bad to me. Here's 20 million acres that is contaminated. Why would those people allow somebody to contaminate their property? I just what do you mean? So elaborate on that. I want to hear what that is.
So
They got
the
paid.
big systems use, so when they do mechanical treatment systems, they're amazingly efficient. They can do what takes in my lagoons 20 days and they can get it done in 8 hours. And again, their priority is getting the water removed from any of the pollutants. But they don't worry as much about the treatment of the pollution. What they do is it settles to the bottom, they scrape it out and they put it in what's called the digester. And they just let it in there and they let it do whatever it's going to do to a certain point, and then they go put it on land, discharge it on land. So
I just
they've
feel
had
so
those-
bad. I feel so bad
And
for those
they've been
folks.
doing that for like 50 years.
Yeah, since the 70s is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
The research that I did
Right.
is we've known about in the forever chemicals. We really weren't testing for.
We didn't
Didn't even know about it.
Right.
There you go. So unsuspecting people were contaminated. That 20 million acres is a pretty good chunk of, and that's
is.
from coast to coast, north to south.
Yeah,
That's-
I would
that's
just say,
throughout.
okay, what does it mean to be contaminated?
Well,
What is-
when
have
EPA
they-
comes in and shuts you down, you can't sell your meat, you can't grow crops, and yet they don't even want people walking on the land. That's pretty damn radioactive to me.
Yep, I would agree.
So that's the The real
Right,
concern that
is
we all
this
have is we've already seen the test
we opening
done.
up the tap for?
Yeah, no, and we don't, to me, taking that risk, because we have such a unique environment here, to take that risk of contamination of any sort, even if that word got out where they said, oh, they put some chemicals out, or, they did some forever chemicals out there. Well, that's where I get my hay from. I guess I'm not getting my hay from there anymore. Just the rumor of it, whether it contaminates it or not.
So we have to be intellectually honest.
Yeah.
If you're going to be that extreme, I want you to take all your carpet out of your house. I want to take all your sofas out of the house. We're going to sit on steel and have concrete floors, because you're going to get much more intrusion of PFAS from that than you will ever dream to get of a one-time discharge out there. So I just challenge you, you need to be intellectually honest. You need to pull your seats out of your car because they're full of it, and sit on a plastic thing, but you can't sit on a plastic because that has forever chemicals in it. And then microplastics, that's going to be the next thing that comes up as soon as they get done 5
Oh,
years
yeah. No,
from now.
Steve and I are very well aware of a lot of this stuff.
We have a gentleman that wants to say something here, if you don't mind, Dave.
Sure.
Yeah, Matt, are you there, buddy?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, you're live, Matt. So go ahead. Go ahead. Dave's right here, and you're live.
Hi, Matt.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, well, I'm alive yet, so I appreciate that.
That's good. Let's take us back a little bit,
Sure.
Dave. Tell me a little bit about yourself. I may have missed part of this. Obviously, you're a high school graduate. Where'd you go to high school?
Hinckley High School in Minnesota, East Central
And
Minnesota.
then, when did you come to this area?
We came in 2008. I came, actually, one of the few people that actually had a job offer here. I came as, worked at Horn Creek Conference Center as their maintenance director.
And how long did you do that?
I did that 5 years, and that's where I actually got into the water industry up there.
That was your experience there in the water industry, was working at Horn Creek as a maintenance director?
Yeah, I became their operator. I got certified in water and wastewater treatment, collections, and distribution, and was their operator for, well, I contract operate. I have a consulting business on the side, and they're one of my customers.
That's good. And then when you got out of high school, did you take any college courses?
I took the 2 years of Bible school and trade school and the School of Hard Knocks. So I was for 23 years, I was actually in the music industry, believe it or not, and ran my own music store and specialized in musical instrument repair.
What did that have to do with running a sewage treatment plant?
I just tell people it's just bigger pipes that I work with.
Oh, I see how that works.
Yeah.
Any chemistry courses that you ever took?
There's different certifications for water and wastewater. So there's 4 levels of certification for both water and wastewater treatment. And then there's 4 levels of water distribution and wastewater collections. So I have 4 certifications. I'm a C certified water operator, level 2 distribution, level 2 sewer collections, and then a B level sewer operator, sewer treatment. And a lot of that chemistry and maths, all that stuff I swore I would never do after high school, I'm now doing. It's very challenging to become certified. Those tests are extremely challenging. So I had to learn. I learned because I needed to. So I learned that stuff in order to pass those certification tests.
Very good. Let's go ahead and take a look at I think it's the lab report that you provided to Jordan Hedberg. Do you have that report with you?
I think I do, yeah.
Well, let's take a look at Let's take a look at page 6 of that.
1, 2, 3, 4. The actual 6th page, one.
Well, I'm looking at page 6 of 22, and I would direct your attention to that page.
Are you referring to the PFAS report, Matt, or the general report?
I'm looking at page 6 of 22 is what I'm looking at on my screen.
What is it? What does the front end of that report say?
It says detection summary at the top.
That might be the PFAS. Because I have
I'm looking
the.
at,
So what are you looking at as far as analytes there?
I'm looking at page 6 of 22 of a 22-page report that has at the top of page 6 the words detection summary, so we can get on the same page.
Detection summary.
Yeah, that's probably the PFAS that I just sent him the other day. I did not bring. I have the report that was sent in for approval to the state. So I'm assuming what you have there is the PFAS sampling report.
Well, don't make any assumptions. Give me the client sample ID of the report you're looking at, please.
Well, it's about a 34-page application that was sent in for approval. So it has.
I'm not asking about the application, Dave. I'm asking about the lab report that was prepared by Eurofin's Environment Testing. It's titled Analytical Report. Do you have that report with you?
I do not have that one. That is the PFAS report.
Well, you came here knowing we were going to talk about PFAS chemicals, and you didn't bring a PFAS report?
Evidently not. No.
Well, how could you have forgotten that? That was basically one of the subjects of the entire conference here tonight.
Yeah. Well, I apologize. I did not. It didn't.
You want to apologize to the public for not bringing that?
I do. I apologize to the public for not doing that. It was my oversight.
Well, I'll be doggone. So really, the thing that really is the subject of the entire, basically, discussion tonight, and you just kind of forgot to bring with you, or you intentionally left it at the office?
I did not intentionally leave it at the office. Believe it or not, it's very busy, and it did not make it into my pile of stuff.
I see. Okay, now, let's go ahead and take a look at a few other things. And you know what? Do you have any recollection of the report that I'm referring to, of anything in it?
I know there's several pages of the analytes of the PFO and PFOS that were tested. But
Do you recollect what those levels were?
Heavens no. There was probably 200 or 300 analytes that were tested.
And I guess you weren't concerned about them if you have any recollection of them, then were you?
No, between Denali, the engineers at Denali, and the low numbers, no, there wasn't anything that was of significant concern, no.
You were relying then on the people at Denali to tell you if there was a problem or not?
That is correct, because they're engineers.
Did you make any notes of those conversations?
Please come tomorrow, and you can ask those questions, because
No, I
both
said,
two of them will be there.
Did you make any notes of those conversations?
No, I did not. There was very little conversation because we're saving it for tomorrow. I asked them to be there and to answer these type of questions.
You're saving all that conversation for tomorrow for the people, is that correct?
That is correct.
And you are aware that the BOCC is required of people that come to the meeting. They're not allowed to ask any questions from the floor. They have to write them out on note cards. Did you know that?
I did. I asked why. I guess they're afraid that it'll go on. I wish they would ask from the floor, but I'm not the BOCC. I'm just the water dude.
I see. Okay, well, let's go back then and take a look at a few things that you've talked about earlier. You mentioned when Steve asked you about taking this sludge down the hill, you said you thought there might be a place outside of the springs where it was taken. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, Denali has large fields out there.
Denali does.
Yes.
Where does Pueblo take their sludge?
I do not know where they take their sludge. I'm assuming they have. I know there's biosolids fields out east of Pueblo.
Did you ever ask anybody from Pueblo where they take their sludge?
Nope, I've never had to. I've never had to desludge.
Well, why not? Why didn't you ask them when you had sludge you needed to get rid of where Pueblo took theirs?
Because they're not a desludging company. They probably have signed up with Denali or some other company to actually do that system for them. So Denali has dozens of contracts all throughout the state.
But you never called anybody from Pueblo and asked them, is that correct?
That's correct. I'm not sure why I would.
How about Colorado Springs? Did you ask anybody from there?
Again, I'm not sure why I would. Why do you think that would be important?
And how about Florence? Did you ask anybody from there?
Again, why would you think that's important in this instance?
I would suppose you would think it would not be important to ask a city 65 miles down the hill from you where they took their sludge. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, because they have their own agreements with their own biosolids companies.
You know who those you don't know who those biosolid companies are, is that right?
That's correct.
You never bothered to find out.
No, because they don't live in Westcliffe.
I see. What do you know about the hydrology of the Johnson Ranch?
Probably more than most people because we had to do a significant amount of that as we did dry up on that place.
Tell me everything you know about the hydrology of the Johnson Ranch, please.
So the bottom 120 acres has a lot of sub-irrigation. We did 4 sampling wells for 3 years to figure out what that hydrology, how that it changed during the year. And we found as we did that study that the water table is very stable. It moves maybe 12 inches on that part.
How far is the water table under the ground on the Johnson Ranch there in the area where you contemplate dumping this sludge?
That is, well, there's a monitoring well there that's 8 feet deep, and off season, like from, I would say, starting into August through the beginning of May, that 8 foot section is deep, so it's farther than 8 feet down. And then during the wet, when everything starts to run, the very bottom of that will be just slightly wet. I've never seen any standing water in it. the years
Never seen any standing water in what?
There is a well that was there was a well that was put out there that they were going to try to use evidently when it was a ranch, and but it was never put in. So we used it actually as just a visual to see where the water table was up on that. So most of that in the blue area, or the area that they're doing, it's right. I wouldn't say it's probably right around 8 feet.
What testing did you know to determine that?
So Denali had to do that that's part of the required sampling that CDPHE does. So
Where are those test results?
we'd have to ask Denali. I do not have the soil tests.
Have you ever seen them?
I have not.
What do you know about, say, 4 feet underground of the Johnson Ranch? What's there?
It all depends where. It's 320 acres. So
How about in the area where you contemplate doing the dumping?
the all that area is the highest. That's probably going to be 8 feet.
What's going to be 8 feet?
The water table is going to be about 8 feet below surface.
What testing have you done to determine that?
You have to confirm that with Denali. That's just from when we bought that and our checking of the well that's on that property.
What was on the Johnson Ranch in the area where you contemplate doing the dumping before people got here? Before people came to the valley?
Like in the 1800s, 1700s?
Yes.
How am I supposed to know that?
I just asked you what you knew.
I don't. I'm not a
Okay,
clairvoyant.
that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Are you familiar with the regulations regarding groundwater in areas where this you might contemplate dumping this sewage sludge?
What regulations are you talking about? So
The
everything.
regulations that govern the
So I guess what I'm doing is I'm leaning really hard on the professionals at Denali, and I'm leaning really hard at the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, because we can't do
Okay.
this without Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment certification. And I've worked with them long enough that they're not going to let anything through because they don't want anybody to come back on them.
Okay, then I understand it. It's fair to say that you are relying on Denali, and the state of Colorado. Is that correct?
I am.
And you really don't have any idea about any of this then. Is that correct?
I have fair knowledge, but no, I am relying on other experts.
Okay. So when you talked about risk, the risk of pollution of the groundwater and everything, you've never done anything to quantify that risk, have you?
Well, I don't know what quantify exactly. I'd say if it's okay with CDPHE, it's probably good because, like I said, their DNA is they don't want anybody to come back to them, so they make up I's to dot and T's to cross, so that they got their hind end covered.
Yeah, I see. And you're relying on them to cover yours as well?
Yep.
Okay. Let me ask you about this part of it. It sounds like to me that you disagree with the EPA. Is that correct?
And what way would you say that?
Well, you don't think that the chemicals that the EPA is now forcing you to test for are dangerous as they say they are. Is that correct?
I just struggle with the concept that they put a drinking water limit on, but do not put a discharge limit on, and then they haven't prohibited the continued use and development of them. Yes, that makes
Use
me...
and development of what?
Of the actual chemicals themselves. They have not outlawed the production of those. They still allow that. That, to me, doesn't seem to make sense. If it's that terrible, evil, ugly, you would think that the federal government would immediately stop all production of that. Why not?
I don't know that I quite understand that, but I'll accept your explanation for
So,
that.
again, if this is really, really terrible, why does the federal government still allow these companies to produce this chemical? You would think that if it's this dangerous that it would be immediately stopped.
Like I said, then I'll accept your explanation of that. You don't have any chemical background, no chemistry, no statistics, none of that, and you're not relying on any skill, training, education, or experience that you have to make any of those contentions or decisions or arguments, if you will, or opinions. So I'll leave it at that. Let me turn to the lawsuits in California and Arizona. I know you're familiar with them. Is that right?
Yes, I've become aware of them, yep.
How did you become aware of them?
Through the paper.
Did you ever do any research on Denali Water Solutions before you entered into negotiations with the company?
I did do research, not nationwide. I did do research on the company itself here in Colorado. And they have not had any fines or any issues like they did in other states.
Well, tell me about the company in Colorado. How is that different from other states, if you know?
Because there's different, not just one crew does the whole United States. Every state has its crew or crews that actually do that discharging. So
I see.
Colorado has different crews that do the discharge that don't work in California or Arizona.
There's been no fines then in California yet. So, insofar as you're concerned, the Colorado crews are fine. Is that right?
There's been no issues, no fines with the state of Colorado.
What did happen in California and Arizona?
They cheated and tried to discharge too much biosolids on too little of land, and they were appropriately slapped.
What studies were done here, insofar as plant use is concerned, in order to determine the amount that should be applied on the Johnson Ranch where they contemplate applying it?
That was done through Denali, and those recommendations and their research and findings are up for approval at CDPHE.
And plant studies per acre, nitrogen content of the soil,
That is
the
correct.
plants that are there and what they'll require, and Denali's told you all of that's been done.
Yep.
And have you asked to see those reports?
Yes, that is in the report that has been sent to the state.
Which report?
That would be the actual application that was sent to the state for review.
Where is that report?
I have a hard copy here. If you give me your email, I can send you a digital copy of that.
You want to leave the hard copy there with Steve Rourke?
Can do. Yep.
Please leave the hard copy for him.
Okay. Can do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate your input on that.
Have a nice day.
Yep, thanks. He owns several $1 million worth of land here.
And appropriately concerned.
And extreme water rights and a future for his family.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he's definitely somebody who's got some skin in the game.
Yep. And I appreciate that.
An extremely knowledgeable individual. So, anyways,
And
tomorrow's going to be a pretty good meeting. Just so you know.
And I know, and I do lean on other people.
Absolutely, brother.
I
Yep.
don't know.
Well, and that's what Jimmy and I talked about. I mean, it's like if you knew all there was to know about it, you wouldn't have hired them.
You wouldn't hire an expert.
Yeah,
I
and
wouldn't be working here.
Well, there you go. Exactly. And you are not in an easy spot. There's just no way around it. So.
Well, I think that's maybe. I mean, I think we've covered about all I'd look to cover. Do you have anything else, Jimmy? Or?
No. I like I said, I was the voice of the people that I listen to, and I work with Matt on his ranches, and I appreciate that man and his knowledge, and that was. He's got a lot of skin in the game. I got a little bitty, but it's reputation, and I guess the biggest thing that I thought was the most damning. And it's not on you. It's to me. It's the commissioners. I thought the commissioners had more of an allegiance to the constituents in whom that elected them. You're not elected. You're you know what I mean?
I'm hired.
Yeah.
I can
And
get fired.
to me, I just thought that the commissioners, being the board of health as well as the commissioners, would have said, "Wait a minute, let's really look into this."
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of disappointing to me. I thought they were maybe even interceding on your behalf because a significant amount of their revenue, I believe, comes from the two towns.
I don't know.
So-
Don't know those numbers.
So those are some of the things that I look at, just in a common sense approach, looking at motives and why somebody would do what they would do or what they wouldn't do. And that's how my mind works. I'm like, wait a minute. You cannot say, we're going to contaminate, or possibly, even if there was a chance, you can't put somebody at risk. Not when you're a trustee. See, that's the difference between your position and theirs. They're a trustee. They have to put their life on the line before, you know what I mean?
Yep.
For an individual. And that's where the tread's hitting the pavement. With me, it's like, wait a minute, guys. Have you looked into this? Have you spent some time making sure that we're not going to get harmed? Mm-hmm. Board of Health, County Commissioner. So that I'm not. You're doing your due process. Absolutely.
Right.
My concern was more on the commissioners, and then not being able to have just an open meeting. We didn't have a debate for the election. That kind of irritated me. So it's a pattern of behavior that kind of the leadership and the commissioners.
Yeah, I like it open.
I know you do.
I like Matt calling and
Absolutely.
and asking hard questions, and
You bet.
Well, that's the
I mean,
only way
that's-
we're going to get to the solution
correct.
we need to
I
get to.
agree.
So that's the difference between a republic and a democracy. You get to hash it out. And that's the
Right.
freedom. That's the First Amendment. Because the second one is not any good at all. I mean, we get into that thing.
As long as there's respect,
Absolutely.
I can agree to disagree, and
Yep.
we can still say, hey, we all have the best interest for this
Yes.
community and for this valley.
Well, and with
That's
that
exactly it.
with that being said, Dave, do you have anything to kind of finish off the evening with then? Or?
I just appreciate you guys offering me this chance.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you
Nailing me
coming.
too bad to the wall. No, I appreciate it, and I am all about synergy of different entities working together, and I've been really working hard to keep those relational realities with the towns and with the county, because really success is only going to happen if we do work together.
Well, yeah,
We can't just do the Lone Ranger thing.
yeah, it's all our problem, regardless if Paul or Buck or Bill or whoever. I mean, they kind of act like, well, it's just all their. I mean,
That's Round Mountain's problem.
I didn't appreciate Paul telling me that, because I mean, to me, it's a real serious deal, and I mean, he has more horsepower than Silver Cliff does, and for him to tell me, well, I'm not even going to go, I thought, boy, that's not a very good answer for someone in a position of leadership.
Correct.
Well, he represents you and your property here, right?
He does.
Yeah.
I mean, even though I don't, I consider myself out of that.
Yeah. But at the end of the
just
day,
sleep
you got $1 million piece of property that we're setting in right now that is attached to what Dave is in charge of, and Paul Winkie being the mayor. It doesn't look good about the leadership in Custer County, whether it's town or commissioner. And these other committees are coming. The other committees that are around are absolutely on fire about, wait a minute, what's going on here? So here again, that meeting should be pretty interesting tomorrow. You know what I mean?
I hope it is. I'm going to plan, because what I realize, I've done several presentations of the new plant all over the state, and I realize, I haven't even ever done it here.
Well, there you go.
So tomorrow, I'm going to do a little PowerPoint of saying, hey, here's where we're at. This is our solution.
No, I mean the whole plant thing and everything is magnificent, man.
Stellar.
If we could just somehow get the biosolids to fly into thin air,
Magic.
then we'd all be.
Yeah, that's the key. Is man.
Yeah, when it comes to that, I'm open to any suggestions. It just know that it needs to be affordable for us.
And that's
do.
doesn't it always come down to that?
Time and money.
So absolutely. And in this situation, it is so critical that we can't throw. To me, this is my point. We can't jeopardize other people's livelihoods over the sludge. And as the knowledge grows about this sludge and the possible contamination of it, how it could hurt, indirect, whether it hurts it or not, just the thought is what my biggest concern was. So taking the high road, not putting other people at
Right.
risk, but properly disposing it. And the amount of money that we've wasted as a county, and I don't know how much we've wasted as the two towns. We need to tighten up our ship here. We need to get things a little bit tightened up, and the communication between the people that are involved really needs to be mature, needs to be honest, sincere. We need to get it out to the public. It's the public's business that we're doing. Yours not so much, but yeah, it is.
It is.
Probably more so
If
than
we don't
anybody.
work, there ain't no public.
That's what
There
I'm
isn't.
saying. So this is a very serious issue, and Lucas, when I talked to him, he said, "Jimmy, I'm going to try to get that done. I'm going to try to get it where we can orchestrate everybody that's got skin in the game and that has some influence." So I think that's coming. I think we're making some headway.
Well, I hope,
Great.
because even at the end of the day, I mean, it's just like back to the low-income housing, right? They want to say, oh, this is going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread, but they're not looking at the realistics of what it is. Somebody has to pay, right? That's all.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, that's the basis of the nuts and bolts of reality, is somebody has to pay. It's not for free.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna, I'm gonna be real protective of those poor individual residences that always get.
And I'm going to be very, very protective over the big picture of the valley.
Yep,
we
and I
have we have a very, very unique ecosystem here, and it cannot be jeopardized even in rumor. It has to have such a stellar image, and it's the image I'm concerned about. And if this takes place, I'm really concerned about the damage that it's going to influence, even if they never got into the creek, even if they didn't pollute it or anything. It's the thought. When I read and started researching 20 million acres contaminated, I was like, who in their right mind would have allowed that to happen on their property? I'm like, what disguised it? Well, it was the lie of the EPA and the people that were applying it and getting rid of their sludge. So I don't want the same thing to happen here. That's in a nutshell. I just don't
Right.
want that duplicated here. And who's doing the testing? And how much are they testing for?
Well,
Just seems a little risky.
and hopefully,
I would just encourage that same amount of concern over a known pollution problem that we have with Great Creek.
Yeah, and absolutely. And
that's
now
all
that's
I-
come to light. So that's another concern. Let's not add to it. It's
That's
already
actually
And I can
asinine.
argue that, but
right.
dang, that needs to be, if we are so concerned
And,
about
and,
this
and,
valley, that
and
is a
that's one of
huge
them things that,
concern.
Dave, that I mean, for $500, right? It could have been done already. And to try to the state to try to say, well, we're too poor and we're too overworked. I mean, go play that tune somewhere else, because what we're asking you to do to test this creek at certain intervals isn't a very big deal. It's a small little expense to get a lot of big answers, and I'm disappointed that they haven't gotten that done yet.
Yeah, that's so we're again, it's opening up more cans of worms. We're going to raise the standard. We as individuals here,
about that.
we're about raising standards, and that's where this is going to
And
go.
if we get this new plan in, that's just
that's a big standard.
huge.
Yeah,
Oh, it is,
that's
man. I
huge.
mean, that might be a huge step for mankind. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
This, like I said, you give it 10 years and they figure out what a lot of this stuff is. I mean, if a guy can really find a solution to that, boy, that would be magnificent. Magnificent.
Be
So,
monumental.
man, my
Thank you,
yeah,
Dave,
Hey,
for
you
making
guys-
that
You
happen.
guys rock.
It's a pleasure. Nice to meet you.
Appreciate the time.
Yeah.
And if you need to come on and address, or if you want to be able to, talk about something.
whine about something.
Well, no, you're
You're always welcome. I mean, this
I
is an
appreciate
open
that.
forum.
It's
that-
the voice of the people is what this is about. We don't want to always trust the government. Matter of fact, we never want to. But we also need to be aware of our surroundings and what you're facing. And
Yeah,
if you
'cause-
can say, look, I'm facing a situation here, folks. We need to get together and make this thing
I
happen.
learned a lot of things tonight. And
I did too.
Yeah, so we appreciate all that. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
that's
actually
awesome.
really fascinating.
Yeah, there's lots of plates spinning on a really skinny rod.
You're good at it, though. So you got it down, huh?
Well, with that being said, folks, we wish you all a good evening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Mike's boring. Thank you for being the IT guy. We appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
Thanks again, guys.
Yeah, you
Appreciate
bet.
it.
Thanks again, Dave.
And thanks calling in, Matt. Thank you.